the Industrial Revolution of the Mage Lord. Hey, fanfic family! So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction. So don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 176, Undercurrents in the Online Exchange Meeting. Friday arrived quickly. Even before the official exchange meeting at 9 p.m., the Spellcaster Forum was almost completely logged in. Small groups of members had already spent points to open private chat rooms, engaging in lively discussions ahead of time. Harvey no longer needed to rely on the instant delivery service of the MagicNet teleportation array, as usual, to entrust forum members with his knowledge to purchase the Union's monthly bulletin. Now, with a Magic Encyclopedia section, which hadn't officially launched yet, the 3 Union spellcasters responsible for uploading and entering the information would upload a bulletin to the forum on schedule. Other members who wanted to access the bulletin later simply needed to pay points, eliminating the long wait for delivery. Previously, Harvey had relied on his fellow Academy member Lambert, who is in LA, to send him the bulletin via Spell Courier. However, Spell Courier transmission had obvious drawbacks. While a few thin pages of paper was fine, carrying a bulletin, as heavy as half a book, significantly reduced both flight speed and the frequency of plane travel. This speed, barely twice as fast as a regular postal carriage, often delayed delivery by nearly a month. This meant that Harvey was always reading outdated content from the previous month. Clicking on the first column of the Magic Encyclopedia, Harvey immediately saw the contents of yesterday's latest issue of the bulletin. The front page featured the paper he had anonymously inserted into the Magic Encyclopedia. He repeatedly read the review of the paper mentioned at the beginning of the article. The high praise and affirmation from the Union's chief, Chemo Salas, made Harvey chuckle. No one dislikes sincere praise and commendation, especially for a low-level necromancer like Harvey, who had faced countless subtle discrimination in the past. Although he didn't explicitly disclose his identity as a necromancer in the paper, as a member of the least popular profession among spellcasters, Harvey was quite satisfied with the achievements of his research and theoretical writings. Without his diligent study at the Undead Academy, and his exposure to the forbidden realm of soul transmutation within the necromancy system, Harvey wouldn't have successfully completed his alchemical life-soul transfer experiment, nor would he have stumbled upon some of the hidden knowledge concerning the Leeline. It was only thanks to this largely unexplored area of Leeline knowledge that he was able to conduct controlled experiments and write this research paper, which has been hailed as groundbreaking and revolutionary. The necromancy faction's research into the soul and Leeline may soon give rise to a whole new school of magic, no longer considered taboo and blasphemous. Harvey closed the Magic Encyclopedia forum, stretched contentedly, and a cup of freshly brewed fruit tea was passed to him. Turning, he saw Arsterlin, slightly bent over, staring at him. On the metal head unique to alchemical life, a pair of pupils gleamed with the crimson fire of the soul. Let me congratulate you, my lord, on your achievements, and the recognition and praise you have received. Harvey took the teacup with a smile and said softly, not just me, but also you, Reiner, Pierce, and even Egno who just joined us. This is our joint effort. After all, we are the true fellow travelers, Scorching Lord, everyone, at today's exchange meeting. We must first congratulate a member of the forum. I'm sure you all know that this gentleman anonymously published a research paper that combined bold hypotheses with meticulous verification. It shattered the hypocritical concepts that the Church had instilled in the general public for hundreds of years, and opened up a new research direction for countless research-oriented spellcasters, the practical application of magic power in different materialized forms. Man in the Mirror, at Mr. Kilthuzid, congratulations, Son of Flame, at Mr. Kilthuzid, sincere congratulations. This paper is a resounding slap in the face of the Church, vindicating those spellcasters skilled in alchemical potions and bloodline strengthening techniques who have long been slandered and suppressed by them. Stormwalker, the secret lies above, at Mr. Kilthuzid, the research you've published this time will surely be recorded in the annals of the Union's magical history. It's truly a groundbreaking contribution. As soon as the forum opened, led by the Scorching Overlord, Harvey was immediately swept up in a sea of congratulations from the members. Whether they came from the Union or the Wizard Kingdom, Even the elves and burrowing dwarves, whose identities were clearly not human, offered him heartfelt praise. Harvey, unfazed by the immediate excitement, even took the time to pull up the list of speakers from the focusing array server. A quick scan revealed that among the 30-plus forum members, a handful of 4 or 5 had clearly entered the forum chat room but hadn't participated in the discussion at all. It seems these individuals clearly lean towards the church, or are spellcasters with only minor adherents. They're likely from the ancient spellcasting families of the 7 wizarding kingdoms, quintessentially neutral and conservative. Harvey's introductory course in the School of the Undead clearly documented the history of magic. During the 100 Years' War between the church and wizards, many spellcasters from the southern continent, despite being from long-established wizarding families, sided with the church, becoming traitors and mercilessly suppressing fellow spellcasters. Harvey slid a button on his magical brain, quietly marking the silent members with symbols of concern. Traitors and traitors are a serious concern within the spellcaster forum, and those wavering factions must be constantly suppressed to change their stance and bias. As the forum grew to its current size, Harvey no longer held high expectations for secrecy. Rumors had long circulated within the spellcasting community that an ancient, non-human being had founded a spellcaster forum on the magic web plane, inviting only high-ranking spellcasters to join. Regardless of their private identities, forum members remained anonymous within the forum, so there was no need to worry about a member's real identity being exposed and implicating Harvey, the founder and administrator. After all, he had already created layers of fake accounts and didn't care about being magically opened. Kilthuzid, thank you all for your unreserved praise and commendation. But I must say that the reason I was able to complete this research and successfully publish it is entirely due to the help and support of AdMR. Scorching Overlord, AdMR. Son of Flame, and AdMR. Man in the Mirror, Kilthuzid. Whether it's the theoretical preparation for the experiment, the experimental materials, or the collection of target receptors, I owe it to all of you. Therefore, I'd like to say that this honor should go to the Spellcaster Forum. This is also the purpose of Mr. Turing's founding of the forum. In the advancement of magic, only the selfless help and communication of fellow practitioners can truly take us further. Sitting in front of the magic brain, Phil Holden suddenly recalled the academic content he had discussed with Kilthuzid some time ago. Seeing him type in his member code name, he couldn't help but chuckle with a hint of pride. This guy is quite insightful. I just solved a piece of almost semi-public demon information for him, but I didn't expect him to actually take my favor to heart. Mr. Son of Flame smoothed his slightly messy red hair, feeling secretly satisfied. Mr. Kilthuzid has always been so humble and sincere that it's hard not to be impressed. The Quinn brothers have long praised him highly. We must do everything we can to win over an independent high-level spellcaster who is so close to the Union but hasn't joined any organization or faction. Chapter 177 The Invention That Changed the Course of the War. How did you guys turn him into this mess? Harvey asked in confusion, his eyes wide open as he stared at the demon captive who was thrown on the experimental table in front of him, his limbs all severed, looking like a human stick. Egno took off the protective gloves made of rubber fruit on his hands and explained with a smile, "Sir, the strengthening potion you mixed has revitalized him, and the effect seems to be stronger than he usually uses. It has sent him into a fighting frenzy several times, and he almost broke a lock and injured my assistant." He casually pointed at the other severed limbs, "So I can only do a simple treatment on his aggressive parts. But don't worry, the hemostasis and suturing measures have been done very well, and it will not affect your subsequent experiments." Harvey covered his face speechlessly. What Egno meant by simple treatment, eliminating the aggressiveness, was to directly cut him into a human stick and ensure that this demon captive did not die. Then how did his face and skin become like this? Aside from his eyes, which still retain their normal crimson hue, the demon's entire face and body seemed to have been corroded and dissolved by a strong acid, solidifying and tangling into a horrifying paste. Well, as you know, the fell orc tribe retreated to the glacier after the spring, and patrols often went out without being able to capture fell orc subjects for my drug testing. I assumed you wouldn't need him for additional potion experiments, so Egno still felt somewhat guilty about using his lord's test subject, but seeing his enthusiastic attitude towards potion experiments, Harvey felt he might dare to do it again. As Dallin quickly spoke up to rescue Egno, the fanatical potion experimenter, "Sir, in the mine raid some time ago, many of our soldiers had their faces and bodies severely burned by the fireballs of the demon beasts. Egno is now experimenting with a Potion that can allow the skin to heal and grow again. Harvey nodded in understanding, but couldn't help but teasing. It seems that the potion does allow the skin to heal and grow, but it doesn't restore its original beauty. No, I don't want the soldiers to find that they are permanently disfigured after their burns are healed. This will seriously affect their competitiveness in the marriage market. After that, he and Asdalen laughed mercilessly. After Egno hurried away, a face etched with shame, Harvey regained his composure and instructed Asdalen, "This is the only demon captive sent by the Union. We must use it with care and obtain as complete weapon testing data as possible." Asdalen nodded in understanding. In fact, long before Harvey's anonymous paper, they had already begun research on energy weapons specifically targeting demon soldiers. Harvey had preemptively named it, Anti-Magic Energy Weapon. This inspiration came from the final conclusions of the live-action control experiments. Since demons directly absorb pure magic energy to enhance their own strength, the energy-absorbing beetles, naturally endowed with the ability to absorb it, were naturally the primeval enemy to counter the abundant magic energy within them. The energy-absorbing beetles possessed a natural magical characteristic: they indiscriminately absorbed any material rich in magic energy they could detect. Whether it was the various grades of magic stones Harvey casually tossed out, or the natural magic crystal veins buried deep beneath the territory's castle. Even if Reiner and Asdalen strayed too close to the beetles, their keen sense of the magical energy emanating from their alchemical bodies would quickly swarm around them, attempting to absorb their energy, nearly causing the two alchemical beings to freeze. The crafting of the magic gun requires mature energy-absorbing beetles. At this stage, they no longer crave mana, but instead continuously release pure energy from their biological transformations after breeding and laying eggs. This is also a crucial characteristic for crafting the magic gun. However, the energy-absorbing talent possessed by juvenile beetles perfectly matches the attack characteristics of the weapon Harvey envisioned. If the souls of beetles at this stage were transferred into the alchemical weapon using the same method used to craft a magic gun, the result would undoubtedly be an anti-magic energy weapon that lacks the ability to release energy beams but can rapidly absorb mana. After the territory achieved industrial-scale mass production of magic guns, Harvey arranged to move the beetle nests from the upper levels of the laboratory to the natural mineral veins underground. This would maximize the beetles' daily supply of magic energy. The vast number of magic stone crystal pillars, rich in magical energy, served as the perfect natural beetle feed. Furthermore, the natural mineral veins were surrounded by solid rock, preventing the beetles, who were confined to digging holes in the soil, from escaping. Miniature wolf spiders, encased in energy-isolating arrays, were tasked with caring for these gentle, harmless magical insects. Harvey had previously observed the beetle breeding underground, having witnessed a rapid increase in their reproduction rate after gaining access to magical food, now numbering in the tens of thousands. Of all these beetles, mature ones alone account for a third. We can use some of the larvae to create anti-magic weapons, which won't affect the production of magic guns at all, of course. This assumes that their experiments have proven that these anti-magic weapons can be mass-produced. If the manufacturing costs are too high, widespread adoption is unlikely, even with the Federation's investment. After all, magic weapons can be exported, but the energy-absorbing beetles, the core raw material for the development of the territory's magic technology, must not be leaked. With a swish, Harvey held a metal rod engraved with silver inscriptions and pressed the trigger beneath it against the left shoulder of the demon human stick bound to the wooden frame. A cloud of blood erupted from the demon subject's right shoulder, but the shoulder didn't shatter directly like a hit from a magic gun. Instead, the hard scales on its body blocked the blow, leaving only a laceration. See, it's really hard to inflict direct penetration damage on their scale-covered bodies with a magic gun. Harvey coughed lightly, perfectly concealing his own poor marksmanship. Asdalen walked directly to the demon test subject and observed the wound torn by the magic stone ammunition. The wound, which had been bleeding profusely, had begun to carbonize and shrink, causing the muscles, blood vessels, and skin of his entire right arm to shrink and stiffen. The magic stone ammunition fired from the weapon transformed from the juvenile beetle, upon entering the subject's body, actually absorbed the abundant magic energy originally contained within, causing the injured area to exhibit a condition only seen after the drug was cut off. Asdalen reached into the subject's wound with a pair of pointed pliers and removed the magic stone ammunition lodged in his shoulder blade. He discovered that the ammunition, once pure white, had transformed into a crystalline pale blue. The anti-magic energy weapon truly had a targeted effect on demon soldiers who had been treated with enhanced potions. Chapter 178 Visitors from Malaya. Harvey sat in a chair in the castle study, sipping the warm fruit tea the guards had just brought him while Reiner reported on the recent progress of the Territory City Hall. President George Santos of the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce has been asking us for the third time when we can sign the order for the next batch of Magic Stone steam engines. Have all 20 units been delivered to him already? Harvey was a little surprised. 2 months ago, while he was inspecting the new industrial park, the head of the Ministry of Industry had secretly complained to him about the insufficient supply of iron ore at the mines. This had led to many factories suffering from a lack of raw materials and reduced production efficiency. Now, they didn't even have to work 3 shifts, as if they were starving and waiting for food to be cooked. Reiner said excitedly, "Yes, we delivered the entire first batch of Magic Stone steam engines he ordered before spring, and we've already received the full payment of 3,000 gold pounds. The Dragonstone merchants are very satisfied with the machine's efficiency and want to order another batch to cover all their mines in Orland." Reiner was particularly concerned about the export of territory goods, primarily because he was currently responsible for overseeing the territory's finances and municipal affairs. Aside from printing paper money for internal circulation, all materials needed for production and daily life in the territory had to be imported from Harvey's own treasury, using real money. This meant that the territory's current population of over 10,000 still relied heavily on Harvey for daily necessities. Seeing his lord's treasury gradually depleted from its former abundance was a source of deep pain for Reiner. Now the territory can produce valuable goods that can be sold externally, which can increase the income of the city hall, although it is not as much as the profits from plundering the evil orcs and demons. It is also worth being happy about, which means that under his management, the territory can finally start to make money for Lord Harvey. Give them an order for another 20 units. Don't feed them too much, Reiner. Maybe these cunning businessmen will turn around and sell the Magic Stone machines we worked so hard to make to others at double the price. Reiner, who has followed Harvey the longest, is no longer as honest and ignorant as he was in the past. A cunning laugh with metallic friction came out of his throat. Sir, I know what you mean. This is called hunger marketing. Right, Harvey laughed and glared at Reiner, and asked, how is the training of the technical workers transferred from the Magic Stone machine factory and the iron foundry going? Next month, I want to see them officially put into the transportation factory to start work. Reiner imitated Harvey's habitual action, slapped his forehead and said with a smile, by the end of the month. They will be able to complete the production line process training by the end of the month. The transportation factory has been completed, and the production line is also being assembled. After that, he bowed and hurriedly left the territory castle and returned to the city hall. As Dallin, who stood aside and didn't want to get involved in these trivial matters, waited until Reiner left before slowly speaking, "Sir, the group of alchemists and apprentices that the Alchemy Exploration Society agreed to hand over to us, arrived in the Wizard Kingdom of DOS a week ago. They have been staying in the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce for a long time. The people from the Chamber of Commerce asked me to ask you when you will arrange for someone to pick them up to the territory." Harvey slapped his forehead and remembered that he almost completely forgot about this group of high-end alchemy talents that he had obtained by selling Pierce's blood. What? They've already reached us. Harvey stood up and exclaimed in surprise. If we send someone to pick them up today, how long will it take to reach the territory? As Dallin said helplessly, we definitely can't use transport vehicles like warbeasts to enter the southern border. Such an ostentatious display would attract the attention of the nobles and the Federation. The mountain roads aren't suitable for carriages either. We'll have to fetch them on foot, which will take about 3 days. Transportation is a major problem. I wonder if these frail alchemists and apprentices can withstand the arduous journey over the towering Jackdaw Ridge and through the dense and rugged northern forests to reach the frontier territory safely. We'll hire a few carriages for them from Dallers to Jackdaw Town. Once we reach my warehouse in Jackdaw Town, we'll have them cross the mountains on foot. After the long journey across Jackdaw Ridge, the group, having just reached the edge of the territory's walls, slowly and arduously made their way towards the southern gate. Most of the group, dressed in dark brown short robes, were young men, perhaps 15 or 16, dusty, limping along, often needing assistance from accompanying Northern Army soldiers. On the back of the orc officer Daff was a young man in his early 20s with short blonde hair. He wore a long, lace-up robe, Though slightly dusty and stained, that was clearly of rich material and embroidered with the gold thread. He was a certified novice alchemist, officially certified by the Alchemy Quest Society. After the towering 5-meter-high city wall came into view, Chris remained dazed and muttering, "Beyond the border, in the northern wastes, there's such a vast expanse of land? Which descendant of a hereditary noble has come here to carve out this great feat?" He instinctively turned to look behind him, at the group of young apprentices who had followed him closely, brought here from a great distance, and saw that their expressions were also filled with shock and confusion. Despite the arduous journey across the mountains, the children followed silently, none complaining. This tenacity was enough to sustain their steady progress on the path of alchemy. Only my frail body couldn't handle the rugged terrain. Halfway up the southern slope, I twisted my ankle and had to ask this ungainly, muscular officer to carry me all the way to the pioneering area. Thinking of this, Chris squinted his eyes in extreme shame, and couldn't help twisting his body, and asked the officer who was carrying him on his back, "Mr. Officer, I wonder which hereditary royal descendant made the pioneering contribution to this magnificent pioneering territory." Dave hurried on his way with his head down, but he didn't expect that the light bamboo pole on his back would suddenly ask questions, but he couldn't understand the questions at all. So he could only speak in a rough voice to fool people. "What hereditary? What royal family? What pioneering contribution? I don't know." He raised his head and gestured to Mr. Bamboo Pole to look at the city gate that was close at hand, and said proudly, "This is the Lord's fiefdom, and it is also my home. My house is 2 stories high, with 6 rooms inside and outside." Chris was choked for a moment, paused before continuing to ask, "I'm not asking about your home. I mean, which lord is it? What is the title and title?" Dave was stunned for a moment, turned his head and looked at him as if he was a fool. "The Lord is the Lord? What's the point of a title and title?" Chapter 179. Where did this bumpkin come from? The south gate of the Pioneer Territory's city wall faced the northern foot of Jackdaw Ridge. It was usually the quietest, with few refugees queuing for entry. But today, a small group of people were already standing at the gate, waving vigorously at Dave, Chris, and the others from a distance. Chris, feeling somewhat embarrassed as he lay on Dave's back, struggled to get off the ground and, supported by his apprentice, limped toward the group of people who were clearly there to greet him. A young man in an off-white robe, his lush hair half-tied, stepped forward with a smile, shook Chris's hand, and greeted him warmly. "Are you Mr. Chris? What a promising young alchemist. I'm Igno Medeiros, the director of the Frontier Territories Medical Center. I'm Chris Bird." "Hello, May." As they exchanged pleasantries face to face, Chris suddenly noticed a pair of pointed ears between his hair. One of them was slightly mutilated, as if it had been severed in half by some sharp weapon. Mr. Medeiros, he was actually a hybrid elf. The noble lord of the Frontier Territory was so bold as to secretly take in a hybrid elf and allow him to parade so openly, without even attempting to conceal his identity. Did the Elven Kingdom have a strict covenant with the other nations and the Federation, forbidding the shelter and assistance of hybrids accused of polluting the Elven bloodline? Only then did Chris remember that the officer leading the territory's private soldiers, named Duff, who had come to greet them in the remote town of Jackdaw, was also a half-orc. He seemed completely oblivious to his humble status, barking orders at his human soldiers along the way and seemingly endearingly popular with them. This vast and hidden frontier territory, located north of the border of the Divine Spine Mountains, was truly a chaotic place in terms of its personnel composition. Igno ignored Chris's surprised look and continued his warm greeting. "Come on, register at the city gate first. I'll be your host during this time. Feel free to ask me any questions." Chris nodded in understanding. Registration for entry into the city was a standard form of identity verification in many closed territories under martial law or curfew. Even if the Lord himself didn't care, the territory guards and patrols wouldn't easily give up this lucrative position. After all, the entrance fee collected for entering and leaving the territory was a lucrative one. Name, age, background, and specialties. The city hall official guarding the southern gate, rarely seeing a single outsider enter the city, was instantly alert. Chris Bird, 21 years old, from Alair, specializes in alchemy, he asked, pulling a long-prepared gold pound from his purse. He gently placed it on the table, pressing it with his finger and pushing it toward the official in charge of registration. "Mr. Guard, I and the 15 apprentices I brought with me all need to register to enter the city." The official stared at the gold coin he pushed, stunned for a moment, and then asked in confusion, "Foreign currency? No, 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 you're mistaken. I'm only registering your basic information here. If you want to exchange it for territory gold, you'll have to go to the bank next to City Hall." Chris was also stunned. Hearing the request to exchange the currency, his heart pounded with fear. Oh my god, this lord of the frontier territory actually minted private coins and openly circulated them within the territory. This was a serious crime punishable by death by arrest and hanging by the sword, guaranteed by the royal families of the southern territories. He didn't dare ask further, his face flushing red as he stammered, "No, no, no, I don't want to exchange the territory's currency. I'm just paying you the city entrance tax." The civil servant chuckled and, with a wink, explained, "Who told you there was a tax to enter the city? Where did this bullshit rule come from? Aren't taxes already deducted from everyone's salary?" Chris kept his mouth shut, not daring to reply. He turned and looked pleadingly at Egno, who stood waiting nearby. All right, this young gentleman is new to the north and isn't familiar with our rules and regulations. Hurry and register him, and then let us in." The civil servant scratched his head and replied respectfully, "Understood, Mr. Egno." Chris, clutching a small stack of paper cards, followed Egno, his face bewildered, listening intently as he spoke a torrent of basic information about the territory. "After you've settled down in your residence, you must distribute this card to everyone you brought with you. Don't lose it casually, otherwise, if you encounter an identity check by the defense forces and the police department, you will be treated as illegal residents and taken back for tea." "Drink tea?" Chris keenly noticed the abnormality in the other party's words. After pondering for a moment, he asked in a low voice, "Lord, will you allow high-ranking officers in the territory to privately associate with alchemists like us?" This time it was Egno's turn to be stunned. "What do you mean by privately associate?" "Ha ha ha. Sorry, when I said drink tea, I meant that I would arrest you and take you back to the police department for interrogation. I didn't really invite you to have tea." For a moment, the two people walking side by side felt a little awkward. They felt that they were not on the same channel when talking to each other. After a while, Chris finally couldn't help but speak first. "Mr. Medeiros, I wonder when I can formally meet the Lord?" He paused, and asked a little entangledly, "And, until now, I still don't know the Lord's name." "Ha ha ha, it's okay, just call him Lord like me. Only the mayor and chief advisor, as well as the commander of the territory army, who have a closer relationship, dare to call you by your real name." Egno touched his chin with stubble, and continued, "The order I received is to receive you and arrange accommodation for you. I don't know anything else. Maybe tomorrow, the chief advisor will meet with you." The two walked at the front of the team, chatting and answering, and soon came to a two-story building. "Okay, this is the accommodation assigned to you. The guys from the construction department said it's called a guest house. It's for temporary accommodation for visitors like you from the southern border." Chris looked around and realized he'd walked all the way from the city gate to here along a remarkably straight road. The road was paved with what looked like slag and gravel, hardened by rolling stones and remarkably smooth, without a single pothole. Dense, tall trees lined the road, giving the street a lush, spacious, and smooth appearance. An apprentice couldn't help but sigh quietly. Compared to Lair, this place isn't much different. Except for the neat gray walls of the houses, someone in the distance called out, "Mr. Egno. Mr. Egno. Why are you in the city district today?" Chris squinted and saw several soldiers in dark gray uniforms and leather felt hats, smiling and walking quickly towards him. "Wait." His eyes narrowed, noticing something amiss. The gray-clad soldier in the lead, he rolled up one of his trouser legs, revealing a mechanical prosthetic leg with a brassy metallic sheen and strange patterns on its surface. With his swift steps, the metal leg flexed and moved with the same nimbleness as a natural leg, his gait completely belying the impression of a broken leg. No. The Exploration Society had conducted countless experiments grafting and fusing living subjects with alchemical devices, but achieving a perfect, seamless integration of the alchemical prosthetic limb and the host was impossible. Furthermore, those who underwent these grafting experiments would suffer from erosion at the graft site, leading to complete dislocation of the metal limb, forcing them to undergo the agonizing torture of amputation to prevent the necrotic wound from becoming infected and ultimately fatal. Impossible. How did they do that? Chris's eyes suddenly widened. He lunged forward, kneeling to his knees and grasping the soldier's flexible metal leg. He trembled, asking, "How can your metal leg bend and straighten so flexibly, and even allow you to maintain your balance while walking?" He traced the metal prosthesis upward, reaching to pull off the man's uniform pants. "Where is the graft wound on your severed limb? Isn't it necrotic and eroded?" Max, stunned, quickly grabbed his belt, which had been nearly torn off, and pulled out his metal baton from his waistband. He raised his hand to strike the madman who had rushed to pull off his pants directly on the forehead, but Egno's quick eyes and hands stopped him. "Don't do it. He's an alchemist from the south." Max curled his lips, slowly sheathing his baton. He glanced at Egno, then at the perverted young man beneath him, who was hugging his thigh and muttering something, and couldn't help but mutter something. "Where did this bumpkin come from? Why did he pull my pants right away?" Chapter 180 True Soul Refining. After being forcibly held down by Egno and dragged into the guest house, Chris still leaned against the window reluctantly, pressing his face tightly against the window glass, looking at the prosthetic soldier who was cursing softly and gradually walking away. "Mr. Medeiros, that soldier, his name is Max, right? I beg you to tell me where he lives and who exactly replaced his alchemical prosthetic limb with that one." Egno pulled him to sit on a chair in the lobby on the first floor and patiently soothed him. "Mr. Chris, please don't worry. Since you have signed a contract with the Lord, we will be colleagues working together in the future. I will answer all the questions you want to know in detail." He pointed around and continued, "This guest house has 8 rooms on 2 floors. There are just enough double rooms for you to allocate. There are toilets and bathrooms upstairs and downstairs. If you need to go out, remember to bring your temporary ID cards, but it's best not to leave the municipal area. We, the residents here, don't like outsiders." The soldier you just saw is actually a police officer of the Territory Police Department. Patrolmen like him wander around various areas day and night. If they encounter someone who can't produce an ID, they will be directly handcuffed and taken back to the police department's detention center to spend the night. He explained it in detail, noticing Chris still mumbling, seemingly lost in thought. He couldn't help but sigh. "Mr. Chris, if you're truly interested in alchemical prosthetics, there's no need to rush. Many war-worn police officers and soldiers in the territory have undergone these types of prosthetic implants." Chris immediately snapped back to his senses, standing up and shaking Egno's hands. He earnestly said, "Please allow me to see the Lord, Mr. Medeiros, as soon as possible." Just then, Dave, accompanied by a personal guard, hurried over and pressed a note into Egno's hands. Egno glanced at it briefly and smiled. "What a coincidence, Mr. Chris. The Lord has received news of your arrival." But, he then handed the note to Chris. Chris quickly took it, unfolded it, and squinted his eyes to read it carefully. "Welcome to my territory, Mr. Alchemist from LA. I heard you're very interested in the improved alchemical prosthetic limb transplant surgery. Actually, I believe the gifted alchemists of the Alchemical Quest Society must have gone through a much more complex and lengthy experimental process. I've only made some minor improvements and upgrades, along with a bit of sudden inspiration. I'll be waiting to meet you at the Lord's Castle in 3 days." Hoping to learn the specific answer, Chris clutched the note and slumped into his chair, feeling powerless. He glanced at the clock on the wall of the hall and muttered with a wry smile, "These will surely be the longest 3 days of my life." For the next 3 days, Chris didn't leave the guest house. He also strictly controlled a dozen or so apprentices he brought with him, keeping them all within the comfortable rooms of the 2-story building, refusing to venture out without permission and causing unnecessary trouble. After calming down and reflecting carefully, he understood clearly what Mr. Medeiros, his host, had meant when he said, "Local residents don't like outsiders." This pioneering territory nestled in the northern wilderness held countless previously unknown secrets. This was why his 2 mentors had emphasized the need for him to sign a confidentiality agreement when arranging his arrival. But none of that mattered. After witnessing the successful alchemical transformation of a living being, nothing else piqued his interest. When Chris was finally led by several personal guards into the Lord's Castle and met the owner of the note, he was still somewhat surprised. After patiently completing the formalities for a spellcaster meeting in Noble, he couldn't wait to ask before he even settled down in his chair, "My lord, please allow me to make an impolite request. I'd like to speak to your alchemist in person." "Alchemist?" Harvey laughed. "Where did you get an alchemist? Until today, the only alchemist in my territory is you, a newly arrived alchemist. He raised his hand and asked the waiter to bring 2 cups of warm fruit tea. He explained gently, "It is precisely because of the lack of alchemical talents like you that I reached an agreement with the 2 gentlemen of the Exploration Society to introduce you here for me." Chris was stunned on the spot with a teacup in his hand. He quickly took out a wrinkled note from his arms, which he had read over and over again, and asked haltingly, You mean that the alchemical prosthetic implants mentioned in this note were all done by you?" He then raised his head and took a closer look at the thin, frail pioneer lord, who was about his own age. He noticed that his pale, lean, and bookish face was rimmed with dark circles under his eyes, and his pupils were streaked with faint red bloodshot. He looked weak and exhausted. You're a spellcaster?" Chris asked in disbelief. "Are you a research-oriented spellcaster?" Harvey nodded with a smile. "Yes, I'm an orthodox academic spellcaster, but I'm quite interested in alchemy, and I've made some minor achievements in this area." Chris immediately stood up and, again offering Harvey the ancient wizard salute that distinguished between higher and lower-ranking spellcasters, whispered, "If you mean successfully completing a living alchemical transplant experiment as a minor achievement, then a novice alchemist like me is worthless, worse than a pig." The fact that his employer was also a spellcaster deeply versed in alchemy put Chris in a difficult position. He didn't know whether to open his mouth and discuss the details of the living alchemical transplant experiment and the secrets of its success. While alchemists weren't as clingy and factional as traditional spellcasters, most were reluctant to share such advanced alchemical secrets and related knowledge with their peers. Harvey immediately noticed his hesitation and spoke up. "You want to know how I achieved the perfect living alchemical implant experiment, right? Since you've signed a confidentiality agreement and agreed to work for me for 5 years without compensation, I'm willing to share this knowledge with you." He smiled and waved his hand, stopping Chris's ecstatic attempt to rise and salute again. "Before I discuss the alchemical experiment in detail, I'd like you to meet my 2 assistants. Perhaps after seeing them in person, you'll change your mind and no longer be interested in mere prosthetic implant technology." As Harvey spoke, he raised his hand and pressed the alchemical call device next to his chair. After a crisp simulated brass bell rang, 2 heavy footsteps sounded simultaneously at the entrance of the castle hall and at the corner of the stairs leading to the 2nd floor. Chris glanced around and saw 2 alchemical prosthetic bodies, shining with a metallic sheen and exuding a rich mechanical beauty, walking quickly towards him. The alchemical prosthesis with a deep red crystal luster shining in its eye socket stopped in front of Chris and suddenly uttered a word with a slight metallic friction sound. "Welcome, young alchemist from the southern border. I am Lord Harvey's chief advisor." As Dallin, another prosthesis standing beside him, also said, "Hello, Mr. Alchemist. I am the chief administrator of Lord Harvey's territory. You can just call me Reiner." Chris slid down from the high-backed chair to the ground, knelt on his knees with an extremely terrified expression. "Miracle. This is a soul creation." Harvey really didn't expect to scare the other party like this. He quickly stood up to support him and explained, "Yes, I just want to tell you that in addition to prosthetic transplants, I have actually successfully realized the important experiment of transferring the souls of intelligent creatures to alchemical creations." As he spoke, he pulled the young alchemist, who was sliding and kneeling on the ground. He pulled hard and found that he didn't move at all. He looked down and found that the other party's eyes had rolled back and he fainted on the spot. Chapter 181 Observer Neumann. When Chemo Salas entered the secretarial office, the 3 high-level spellcasters in charge of entering the magic encyclopedia quickly stood and saluted. He waved his hand casually, signaling them to continue their work. He then sat down at a spare magical computer and began to review the uploaded documents. After the final batch of documents arrived today, the magic encyclopedia's basic content will be nearly complete. The Union chief looked at the crystal screen, where the various documents neatly divided into various schools of magic and organized into categories, and nodded with satisfaction. A large number of universal spell model structures and spell analyses for rings 7 to 9. Advanced theories and research documents covering major spell categories such as elements, arcane, and nature. Advanced alchemical secrets and alchemical alchemy knowledge publicly published and submitted by the Alchemical Exploration Society. Complete decryption of a large number of rare magical materials, including minerals, plants, and organisms. Salas suddenly asked, "Why don't I see any literature on necromancy in the encyclopedia? Did you miss it during the review process?" Hunter quickly stood up and explained a little awkwardly, "Your Excellency, The necromancy faction has had too few relevant papers and research results that have passed review and been published in recent years. He paused, picked up the written list he had compiled, and looked through it for a moment. The last necromancy document that passed the review of the council and was successfully published in the Union Bulletin and included in our collection was in the year 569 of the glorious calendar. That was 12 years ago. Salas took a bibliography Hunter handed him and immediately spotted the paper labeled necromancer. It stood out, standing alone, amidst the chorus of papers on elemental arcane and natural alchemy. Analysis of the Fluctuation and Activity Cycle of Death Energy in the Magical Weave, by Julian Aziz. The name of a strangely unfamiliar spellcaster, seemingly of little repute, left him with no recollection. Hunter, with familiarity, introduced him. This gentleman is a registered intermediate-level arcane spellcaster with the Union. He works as a junior instructor at the Orland Royal School of Magic. Arcane spellcaster? How could he publish a paper on necromancy? Salas frowned. Hunter responded cautiously. He was originally a legitimate necromancer, a graduate of the Pharaoh's Undead Academy. However, as you know, their reputation and treatment in the magic world aren't very good, so he later turned to arcane theory. However, he also has considerable talent in arcane research. After publishing 2 papers, he was successfully hired as a junior instructor at the Royal Academy of Algerian Magic. Salas hummed, not wanting to delve into the issue further. Since the Union's founding, the number of registered high-level undead spellcasters can be counted on the fingers of one hand, and none have even achieved the title of legend. This unpopular school of magic, which has long dealt with corpses and death, has always been discriminated against and its talent has dwindled. Review it again and re-enter the necromancy literature you've eliminated, Salas added before rising to leave. Since it's called a magic encyclopedia, it must truly be comprehensive. Returning to his private study on the top floor, Salas quickly entered a guided meditation to stabilize his mental state, preparing to begin work on a new research paper, inspired by the controlled experiment published a few days ago by forum member Kel'Thuzad. He casually summoned his manipulator hand, picked up his ink-drenched quill, and was about to start drafting his paper when the study door slammed open. Dawson, a short man with a comically red nose, rushed in. Behind him, an invisible mage's hand was controlling a tall, full-length mirror, like a floating shield behind him. Saras suppressed the urge to curse. Aside from fellow legendary spellcaster Dawson, no one else could instantly break the confinement array surrounding his study door, so how could they be so rude as to interrupt his work? Are you crazy, Dawson? Why are you running up to me with a mirror on your back? The full-length mirror behind Dawson levitated, then landed steadily on the ground. The familiar figure of the black-robed Chief Wes Gallagher emerged from the mirror. Salas, it's me. I asked Dawson to come find you immediately. Salas frowned and said, what do you mean? What urgent matter happened in the Evil Moon Mountains or Blackstone City? Gallagher stood up in the mirror, his whole body pressed against the mirror surface, and whispered in an extremely urgent tone, that observer Mr. Neumann suddenly contacted me alone. He sent me a very strange magical weapon through the instant teleportation array of the Magic Network Forum. The black-robed chief took out a strangely shaped silver metal short staff from behind his back and showed it to Salas and Dawson in front of the mirror. Look, this is the magical weapon. It looks like an ordinary staff made of molten silver. The spell inscriptions on it, well, they express the meaning of energy gathering and strengthening. Dawson asked in confusion. I don't see anything unusual. This short staff seems to be a common item mass-produced by the Exploration Association. The inscriptions on it only provide a simple spell amplification effect. Gallagher shook his head, his expression complicated as he fished out a few finger-sized pure white crystals from his pocket. Take another look at this, Salas scoffed. It's just shattered pieces of magic crystal after the energy of the charged magic stone is depleted. What's so special about that, Gallagher? Stop keeping us in suspense. The black-robed chief chuckled and inserted the pure white crystals into the grooves on the thicker end of his silver staff. Then he stood up and directed the full-length mirror's perspective to follow his movements. He was currently in Black Rock City, a high-end laboratory belonging exclusively to the Federation chief. Dawson and Salas watched the scene in the full-length mirror in silence as he slowly walked over to a bound demon captive, raised the silver staff horizontally, and pointed it at the captive. As if triggering a mechanism, a phantom, lightning-fast white light shot out from the staff tip, striking the captive directly in the shoulder. Gallagher immediately approached the captive demon, pointing to the wound on his shoulder from the staff's spell. Salas and Dawson were immediately astonished to discover that the wound, which had previously been bleeding profusely, had suddenly begun to decay and atrophy. The captive demon's once muscular shoulder, from the skin to the muscles, tendons, blood vessels, and even the bones, had carbonite, as if it had been burnt by a blazing fire for a long time. After waiting for about a minute, Gallagher raised his finger and gently poked the captive's shoulder. The unconscious demon's entire arm, from shoulder to arm, instantly shattered into slag like weathered wood, completely disintegrating from its torso. Gallagher turned to look at his two old friends outside the mirror and spoke with suppressed emotion. That observer, Mr. Neumann, after handing me this magical weapon, simply asked me to test its power. Chapter 182 Master, I want to learn real alchemy. Chris's second meeting with Harvey happened 2 days after he lost his composure and fainted in the Lord's castle. This time he had made all the mental preparations in advance, trying not to embarrass himself in front of the Lord. My Lord, no, perhaps I shouldn't address you by your worldly title. In the way of alchemy, you have far surpassed those higher-ranking and chief members of the Exploration Society who are known as geniuses, and have touched upon the ultimate. Chris suppressed the trembling in his voice and humbly bowed his head, saying, I should call you master, a true master of alchemy. Harvey chuckled, not really caring about the other party's heartfelt compliment. That's not necessary. Although your two mentors and I have never met, we have a close relationship, and they have also helped me a lot in my alchemy experiments. Chris raised his head and pleaded with an earnest gaze, Your Excellency, please let me follow you to learn true alchemy. Those top-level alchemy secrets involving the refining of life and the creation of souls are the ultimate ideals I have pursued all my life. As he spoke, he took out the magic contract that belonged to him from his arms and handed it to Harvey with trembling hands. For this, I am willing to give everything, even without having to abide by this confidentiality contract that only lasts for 5 years. As long as I can touch upon that ultimate knowledge, even if you need me to serve you for life, I have no regrets. Harvey hadn't actually considered that, after 5 years of training, these young alchemists, gifted to him, would be allowed to leave freely and return to the LA Cheap Alchemy Exploration Society. As time approached, he would naturally do everything he could to keep them within his domain, using everything from carrots and sticks to coercion and inducement. But it would be best to secure the heart of the leading young alchemist now. Thinking of this, Harvey couldn't help but tease, what if the price of learning these secrets was that even after your lifespan expired, I would still extract your soul and transform it into a cold alchemical creature, bound to endlessly work and serve me? Would you accept that? Chris was stunned for a moment, then instinctively blurted out, Ah, such a good deal? Sir, you will promise right now, to grant me immortality in alchemical form? Such an unconventional response nearly made Harvey spit out the hot tea he had just sipped. Okay, I thought it was a punishment, but it turns out to be a reward. He tried his best to cover up his gaffe, and quickly said, Don't worry, I'm not going to promise you anything right now, immortality or anything like that. It all depends on your performance over the next 5 years. He pulled a thin booklet from his pocket and had the waiter hand it to Chris, who was still feeling agitated. Take a look. This is the goal you'll need to devote your energy to for a long time to achieve. You'll also have to shoulder the responsibility of training the alchemy apprentices you've brought with you, Harvey instructed leisurely as he sipped his tea. 3 months, that's all I'm giving you. In 3 months, I need those 15 alchemy apprentices qualified to serve as technical advisors in various industrial production departments within the territory. Chris flipped through the booklet, confused, and muttered the contents in a daze. Bicycle R&D, design. An industrial mass production plan, rubber tire molding experiments and production arrangements, full coverage of magical lighting facilities in the pioneering territory. The young alchemist felt more and more confused as he read. The contents of the entire book made him begin to doubt his identity as an alchemist. Do these tasks really all require the participation of alchemists? He scratched his head in panic and muttered, I have never learned any knowledge related to this in the past. I don't have no experience at all. Harvey smiled and spread his hands. That's why you need to learn from me. As the saying goes, you should apply what you learn. That's the truth. Don't be so self-deprecating and doubt your understanding of alchemy and your own talent. You need to work for me wholeheartedly for the next 5 years. I will pay you a generous salary according to the treatment of a high-level technical consultant in the territory. Secondly, whether you are willing to stay with me for a long time or still abide by the 5-year agreement we signed earlier, You must strictly abide by the confidentiality regulations and not disclose any information within the territory to others. If you accept my harsh terms, the territory will provide you with official housing in an independent alchemy laboratory. Furthermore, while you complete your daily tasks, I will personally teach you alchemy. Even before Harvey finished his words, Chris's eyes were red with tears. What kind of harsh terms were these? A generous salary, comfortable accommodations like a guest house, and a dedicated laboratory. Most importantly, he would be able to learn the ultimate alchemy secrets from this master alchemist, the knowledge of life transformation and soul creation. Chris felt his heart pounding. If he performed well enough to satisfy the master, he might even have the opportunity to receive the sacred soul transformation and become the immortal creation that alchemists always dream of. Chris Bird is willing to serve you for life, Your Excellency. Chris saluted again. Harvey didn't care much for the tedious formalities between these spellcasters. He waved his hand and said, "Your alchemy laboratory is built next to Regno's medical hospital. It's the half-elf gentleman who received you. You should spend more time together in the future. After all, a lot of work requires cooperation. He is a potion master who is good at mixing magical potions. You should have a lot in common," Chris said excitedly. "Is the alchemy laboratory ready?" "Sir, I can get to work at any time." He hurriedly flipped through the work manual that Harvey handed him and asked incoherently, "I don't know which part of the work task should I start with." Harvey stood up and walked over with a smile. He stretched out his finger and pointed at the contents of the booklet and replied, "Let's start with a molding experiment and quantitative manufacturing of rubber tires." "What is rubber?" "Wheels." "What are tires?" "It's a special plant fruit that only grows in the northern wastes. You have probably never heard of it before. Its material properties are very magical. You need to meet Regno for the specific situation, and he will naturally explain it to you in detail." Harvey changed the subject with great interest at this point, looking at Chris and saying, "I heard that during your time working at the LA Exploration Society, you were particularly interested in unpopular alchemical creations that could improve the quality of life for the general public." Chris blushed with shame and whispered, "That's just my fantasy. You know, alchemical creations cannot be used on ordinary civilians at will. This is a strict rule that has always existed." Harvey couldn't help but burst out laughing. He patted him on the shoulder and encouraged him, "You don't have to follow those old-fashioned and bullshit rules with me. Apart from the work arranged in the manual, if you have extra free time, you can fully realize your interesting experimental hypotheses. As long as it is an alchemical invention that can help improve the quality of life for the general public, I will fully support it, and I will also give you extra rewards for your inventions." If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183 Public Entertainment. On a sunny afternoon, Harvey squeezed in his lunch break to meet with Uriel Ferguson, a trainee police inspector, in his castle study. The former trainee knight maintained the proper decorum of his position, wearing a pristine, dark gray police uniform. Silver silk stripes embroidered the shoulders, collar, and cuffs, and a silver-threaded star pattern sewn on his left chest, the superintendent's official insignia. He declined a high-back chair Harvey had brought him. He stood erect, his hands folded behind his back, and, without looking away, reported to Harvey the key points of the police department's recent work. "Lord, lately, during our routine nighttime patrols, we've been frequently encountering drunken residents lingering around residential areas. Most of them gather in groups, singing loudly or making a riotous noise until late at night, causing widespread public discontent." Uriel quickly straightened the collar of his tightly buttoned uniform with his mechanical prosthetic limb, paused, and continued, "I believe we should immediately enact a ban on alcohol in the territory to prevent people from squandering their hard-earned income on alcohol. This month, the police have already arrested dozens of civilians for drunken brawls. If this continues, they'll completely sink into their alcoholism and lose their focus on work or life." Harvey listened attentively, nodding his approval of Uriel's words. When he heard him suggest a ban, he spoke gently. "From what I understand, because the northern wastelands are bitterly cold, most residents here have a long-standing habit of drinking to ward off the cold whenever they can. A hasty ban on alcohol would likely cause public discontent." Uriel said seriously, "My lord, as long as you issue an order in the name of the Lord, the people will dare not disobey. In the past, when wars broke out in the southern countries and food production was reduced, many noble lords also enacted laws to ban alcohol. Those who violated the law would naturally be punished with flogging or hard labor, and their bad habits would be quickly eliminated. His grandfather was a small landowner with the title of knight, but when the family property was passed to his father's generation, that unpromising man developed the bad habit of alcoholism. Not only did he not inherit the family's knightly glory, he also squandered all the family property. As a result, Uriel deeply hated the people's custom of drinking and having fun. Harvey asked in return, the official market in the territory can naturally stop producing, brewing and selling alcoholic beverages, but have you ever thought that my people are not poor? They have enough money to buy food and secretly make alcoholic beverages on their own. Superintendent Uriel, are you going to rely solely on the less than 100 police officers in the police department to go door to door every day to confiscate the goods of these ordinary people who brew alcohol for their own drinking? Harvey teased with a relaxed expression. I'm afraid that even if I equip all of you with powerful alchemical mechanical prostheses, you will be too busy. There are more than 10,000 people in the Pioneer territory now. Although he knew that the Lord was not angry, Uriel's face still turned red. After all, he was just an apprentice knight and had no experience in managing civilians and serfs for noble lords. Harvey naturally knew that the young knight superintendent had a decent style, but was a little inexperienced, so he comforted him in a gentle voice. Don't feel ashamed, you have only been in office for a few months, and there will be many more difficult problems in the future than dealing with a few drunkards. Remember my advice, when it comes to issues involving the lifestyle of a large number of people, it is better to guide than to block. Instead of forcing them with laws and whips, it is better to find ways to guide and change their bad habits. Uriel was silent for a moment as if thinking about something, bowed to Harvey again, and said sincerely, My lord, please tell me how I can guide and change the people's habit of drinking. Harvey stood up with a smile, pulled Uriel's mechanical arm, and took him to the window of the study, pointing to the civilians who were leisurely strolling and chatting in the citizen square in front of the castle during the afternoon break. I once read a sentence in a document about the management of cities by ancient nobles. It said that once the granaries were filled with abundant grain, the people, who had filled their stomachs, immediately felt ashamed. Look, they began to spend money on buying themselves new and colorful clothes, and they remembered to brush their leather boots to shine after work every day. The newly opened public baths were crowded with people lining up at night. In the past, these refugees didn't care about lice crawling all over their bodies, so why do they become so fond of cleanliness now? Uriel suddenly realized and muttered to himself, because there's hope in life and extra money in their pockets, everyone has begun to have some face. Harvey laughed and patted him on the shoulder. It's true, but that's right. Instead of being whipped for drunken trouble, it would probably embarrass him more if you hang a sign around his neck and punish him to sweep the streets near his home. The young superintendent was ecstatic after hearing Harvey's suggestion. He decisively saluted and said goodbye to his lord, and left the castle study excitedly. Those drunkards are going to have to suffer these days, as Darren, who had been listening in from the study, quipped softly. Harvey, looking thoughtful, murmured, this is just one of the ways to get these people to change their lifestyles. He immediately sat down at his desk, picked up a quill, and began writing on the white paper. Guards, take my signature and go find the head of the Ministry of Agriculture. Tell him to get me some pig bladders from the farm. A guard on standby in the study was stunned for a moment, but then he immediately stepped forward to take Harvey's approval, saluted, and quickly left. Pig offal? What can it be used for? The smell of that stuff, well, it's been so long, I don't even remember it. It doesn't seem very pleasant, as Darren muttered to himself in confusion. Harvey chuckled, rinse it a few times and it'll get rid of the urine smell. Besides, I'm not going to eat it, so don't worry about these details. Then he pulled the joystick of the alchemy device on the single-way communication and sent a message to Igno, who was working in the medical center, asking him to send some heated and melted rubber fruit picked into the castle. As Dallin had no idea what Harvey was trying to say, and curiously asked repeatedly, rubber fruit pectin, aren't you planning to use it to make wheels? What other magical effects can it have when combined with pig offal? Harvey pulled over a piece of white paper and drew a double circle on it with 2 strokes. Use rubber fruit for the outer layer and pig bladder for the inner liner. I want to make a ball that is extremely elastic and filled with air. He raised the white paper with a circle drawn on it in his hand and said proudly, this ball is an important way to change people's living habits and entertainment preferences. Harvey planned to promote this sport in the army first, and then let the public watch this attractive ball game like holding a shooting competition, and guide them to actively participate in it. Maybe after the sport is thoroughly developed, Harvey can even hold small sports events in the territory. Well, not bad. It seems I have to notify the Ministry of Construction and build a sports field with stands for me in advance. Chapter 184 Officers Club. Harvey summoned the overworked and dusty construction director, Harvey, to the castle. He handed him a few sketches of a sports field he had scribbled, gave him a few brief reminders, and then dismissed him. Choosing a site for the sports field was simple. Since relocating many of the manufacturing plants in the core territory to outlying industrial areas, away from the market and residential areas, a large expanse of unused land had become available near Harvey's castle. Besides the potion garden under construction, most of the vacant land had been temporarily planted with evergreen trees and flowering shrubs, serving as a temporary street garden to improve the living environment. All that was needed was a small, square plot of land to be used as the future sports field. After completing these tasks, he sent his guards to City Hall to retrieve information about the territory's inhabitants from Reiner and find a skilled painter from the southern border. In your time in the southern border, besides painting portraits for nobles and wealthy merchants, did you also paint anything else? Harvey asked the painter gently, as he was brought to the castle. The young painter, trembling with fear, was sandwiched between two guards. He lowered his head, not daring to look directly at the lord. He trembled. Your Excellency, I am only an apprentice painter. I'm not yet qualified to paint portraits of nobles and wealthy merchants. I mainly paint patterns on the porcelain being fired in the kill workshop. Harvey clapped his hands and said, that's enough. Just the person I need. He then had the guard hand the painter a stack of cut paper scraps. The young painter then noticed that the scraps were all identically sized, rectangular, about the size of a child's palm. What do you want me to paint in these? Some numbers and corresponding patterns, nothing complicated. This was a new idea that had suddenly struck him since he had conceived of promoting ball games in the territory. The people of the territory were truly starved of entertainment. Aside from the once-a-time winter festival garden party, the only major event that sparked public interest was the semi-annual military shooting competition. While outdoor ball games need to be promoted, we should also consider recreational activities that can be enjoyed indoors or at home during the colder winter months. The simplest of these is, of course, card games. There's nothing more cozy than playing cards around a warm fireplace on a cold day. However, Harvey had ordinary paper used for writing and the special papyrus used to print gold banknotes found to be too soft for playing cards. They needed a certain degree of hardness and resilience to allow for shuffling and drawing cards when folded in the hand. However, with a rubber fruit, all these problems are largely solved. Simply coat the tough papyrus with a layer of rubber fruit pectin, then paint the numbers and patterns of the cards, and you have a deck of exquisite and durable playing cards. Pierce personally spends a week every month at the River Valley Outpost, commanding the 3 rotating battalions of Northern Army soldiers stationed there, totaling 300 soldiers, who conduct continuous mountain warfare exercises. With the arrival of summer, the last few small tribes of fell orcs entrenched in the river valleys, hearing the news, drove their herds back into the depths of the icy plains. The outpost's last imaginary enemy vanished. Sitting in the steadily advancing warbeast, Pierce fell into a strange, bewildered mood, his sword drawn, his mind wandering. After the repeated battles with the fell orcs in the river valleys, and the small-scale skirmishes against the demons at the natural mineral veins at the foot of the Divine Spine Mountains, there was no longer a single enemy target within hundreds of miles of the frontier territory. The lack of an opponent always felt lonely, and Pierce sighed inwardly. With only a few hours to go until the territory, he would first go to the infirmary in Egno to collect his second half-month allotment of delicious oral liquid, then return to the barracks to pass the time with a thorough training of the newly recruited soldiers. Captain Tommy, who was riding in the same war beast, stole a glance at Commander Pierce, who was pretending to be asleep with his eyes closed. He immediately became alert and quietly poked the battalion commander Vaughn, who was sitting next to him. Boss, when we return to the territory later, do you want to go out of the camp with us for a walk? Vaughn was stunned for a moment and whispered, where to go? The food stalls in the market area have new delicious ingredients for sale. Wayne, who was sitting opposite, chuckled and couldn't help but say, Battalion Commander, don't always think about the food stalls in the market area. A new restaurant has opened in the territory recently. It is said that the chef was transferred from the Lord's castle kitchen, and the dishes they make are the kind that only noble lords can enjoy. Daff hesitantly said, I know, Mr. Egno mentioned it. He has tried it several times and praised the taste of the dishes. It's just, the consumption is a bit high. Let's wait until the military salary is paid this month before we go out and have fun. I say, can you guys stop thinking about food? Tommy rolled his eyes at Duff. I heard from the logistics soldiers that there's a place outside the barracks, called the Officers Club, an activity center. Let's go to the Officers Club after we return to the territory for the handover. Vaughn and the others changed out of their black officer uniforms and donned their everyday light cotton and linen clothing. Led by Tommy, they left the barracks, turned a few streets, and arrived at a 2-story concrete building. A large sign bearing the insignia of the Territory Army hung on one side of the gate. Vaughn struggled to make out the large characters Pioneer Territory Officers Club. Sitting on a bench at the entrance was a middle-aged man in a black Defense Force uniform. He smiled and greeted the group standing by. Haha, are you from the army? The club only accepts military personnel. Tommy quickly pulled Vaughn and the others aside, pulled out his rank identification badges from around his neck, and had them checked one by the Defense Force soldiers guarding the gate. Pushing open the club's door, everyone was immediately struck by the bustling scene inside. The spacious ground floor hall had a long counter on one side, staffed by several waiters like a tavern bar. The rest of the space was occupied by small round tables, each occupied by 3 or 4 guests, some in civilian uniforms and some in military uniforms. These people gathered around the tables, clutching stacks of strange cards, shouting and erupting in raucous laughter. Clever Tommy immediately spotted a familiar figure sitting at one of the tables, Uncle Rooney, the logistics officer in charge. He quickly pulled the dazed and awkward Vaughn and the others over. Hey, little Tommy. You're back from your rotation. Rooney, his officers felt at askew, stood up and greeted them enthusiastically, shooing away the other logistics soldiers who had been sitting with him to make room for them. Just as Vaughn and others sat down, a young waiter came over to the bar, bowed with a smile and asked, Commanders, do you need something to drink? Or if you haven't eaten in the camp yet, we can also provide meals here. Vaughn glanced at the huge cup held by Rooney and frowned. Military regulations stipulate that non-commissioned officers are not allowed to drink at will. Rooney laughed and said, It doesn't matter. Young man, this is a benefit specially approved by the Lord. This specially brewed beer will not make you drunk at all. It is a delicious drink specially provided to the army. He spoke louder and louder, and finally stood up and held up the glass. The soldiers at other tables raised their glasses, laughing and shouting in unison, I wish our respected Lord good health. The waiter immediately took the opportunity to bring 4 glasses of special wine with pure white foam on the surface. Duff couldn't wait to pick it up and take a sip. He felt the delicate foam sliding between his lips and teeth, and the cold and sweet liquid flowed down his throat into his stomach. This bubbly stuff doesn't taste strongly of alcohol, but it has a sweet aftertaste. Come on, try it, it's delicious. Vaughn silently took a sip and turned his head to look at the bustling table next to him. It was full of Defense Force officers who usually had a bad relationship with the Northern Army. The 3 of them sat in a circle, holding a stack of paper with numbers and exquisite patterns in their hands, lost in thought. 3 pairs, damn it, I can't afford it. Chapter 185, Reimagined Soul-Sucking Technique. After nightfall, Harvey, as usual, browsed through the Magic Encyclopedia's archive on the Magic Network forum before engaging in his daily guided meditation. The Federation's collection of materials from the Magic Encyclopedia had been largely uploaded, and Chief Scorching Lord had repeatedly asked Harvey about the approximate timeline for the forum's official launch. However, Harvey felt there was no need to rush. He would first use his administrator status to filter all valuable content, ideally making a secret backup before announcing it publicly at the next forum meeting. The Federation's uploaded materials aren't overly secretive. They've even compiled and shared the research and improved spells of legendary high-level spellcasters and chiefs. While the precious original spells of these master spellcasters weren't publicly available, Harvey, who lacked theoretical knowledge of advanced, general spells, found them beneficial nonetheless. Dawson's Soul Drain, a modified 9-ring spell, a fusion of pure arcane magic and death energy. The Federation is even sharing the current chief's signature trick. However, Harvey immediately realized that the matrix analysis and model construction knowledge required for this spell was one of the highest levels of access in the Magic Encyclopedia. requiring members to pay a full 2,000 points or share a modified spell of the same level to successfully unlock it. According to the agreement with the Federation, if anyone could afford the exorbitant 2,000 points, the Forum and the Federation would split the profits 50-50. The points earned by the Federation would go into the public points pool of Forum members tagged with the Federation's background, for internal circulation. This was like the Federation directly opening a virtual currency bank account on the Magic Network Forum, one that Harvey didn't have to pay interest on. He had also contacted the Frost Giant and the Forest Heart, two prominent members of the Crypt Dwarf and High Elf clans, individually. After a consensus agreement, they also established a shared account. This allowed them to collaborate on pricing when trading their tribe's rare magical materials on the forum, minimizing the risk of being exploited by human spellcasters. Harvey was becoming increasingly adept at maneuvering between forum casters of varying races and factions. This was Harvey's first encounter with high-level fusion magic, and naturally, his curiosity was overflowing, so he couldn't resist using his administrator privileges to secretly learn some for free. While the theoretical analysis and modeling of ninth ring spells were beyond Harvey's current magical knowledge and spellcasting level, the opportunity to broaden his horizons was certainly beneficial. Soul Drain was originally a high-level, general-purpose 7th-level spell, barely edging its way into the Forbidden Curse category. Its underlying model is actually the same as the 3rd-level Mirror Curse Harvey had previously learned. Both curse attacks target the soul, though their power and effectiveness differ significantly. While the Mirror Curse offers some immunity to basic defensive spells, it's severely restricted by the Church's divine arts and requires a precast spell to summon a mirrored clone before unleashing its attack. This makes it a low-level spell with significant flaws and drawbacks. Soul Drain, on the other hand, is a high-level spell that doesn't require prolonged casting or the indirect use of a mirrored clone. Furthermore, after refinements by the legendary chief Soren Dawson, its attack method has become unique, making it easily unpredictable. It's a long-range, clinging curse attack. Furthermore, it blends pure arcane energy with the original death energy, evading divine detection and defense. Dawson's Soul Drain, the spell harnesses one's own magical energy to condense a curse seed fused with death and arcane energies. It can freely attach to any offensive weapon or enchanted item, and can even silently implant itself within living organisms. Once directed by the caster, the powerful curse energy erupts instantly, launching a wide-area attack. The current legendary chief, Mr. Soren Dawson, while a high-level spellcaster stationed at the demon battlefield in the Evil Moon Mountains, employed this enigmatic and powerful curse to single-handedly destroy an entire small demon garrison fortress, escaping unscathed from the encirclement of 3 high-ranking demon priests and ultimately achieving fame and the title of legend. Silent and invisible, yet deadly, the high-level spells of a legendary spellcaster are truly terrifying. Harvey sighed silently, understanding why the Union didn't mind sharing this spell publicly. The core of Dawson's Soul Drain lies in the caster's ability to harness their own immense magical energy to condense a curse seed. Without a caster as gifted and powerful as Soren Dawson, even if an ordinary battle mage mastered this spell, the attack power they could unleash would be no more than a self-destructing truck that could kill a few enemies at most. Harvey was well aware of the difference in power between a nuclear bomb and a grenade. As a mid-level spellcaster, the magical energy stored in his magic patterns wouldn't be enough to condense a curse seed as powerful as a grenade. At best, he could create a large firecracker, blasting the carrier attached to the seed to smithereens, creating a fireworks display before the enemy. Wait? Magical power can be condensed into a curse seed through this spell model. Harvey's eyes suddenly widened as he stared at the spell model displayed on the crystal-like display of his magic brain. Then can mental power also be constructed using the same model to condense a mental power seed? When it comes to the sheer magnitude of the mental power within a mental anchor, Harvey admitted he's never encountered a spellcaster more powerful than himself. This was evident simply by the form each spellcaster's mental anchor manifested. Harvey had stumbled upon a forum post where Mr. Forest Heart, a high-level nature spellcaster, mentioned in a private conversation that his mental anchor was a giant jungle bear. Mr. Scorching Lord, a legendary spellcaster and one of the Union's leading figures, possessed an even more powerful and terrifying mental anchor, an active volcano poised to erupt violently at any moment. But no forum member, in either private or public conversation, had ever mentioned a mental anchor capable of forming a massive planet like Harvey's. If I use the spell model and matrix structure provided by Dawson's Soul Drain to try to condense an energy seed imbued with my immense mental power, I wonder what level of attack power I'll be able to unleash once it's detonated. Harvey knew that common low-level spells like Mind Storm and Mind Shock would create a small-scale mental shockwave, causing the target to briefly experience dizziness, tremors, and confusion. However, these shockwaves could be offset by many defensive spells of the same level, or even directly mitigated or countered. However, he didn't dare try this rashly within his own frontier territory. Using the modified version of Dawson's Soul Drain to detonate offensive spells would be too powerful and difficult to control, potentially affecting civilians and shocking them into a state of utter incompetence. The best place for this experiment was naturally the mysterious beach on the Mind Anchor planet, a place unique to him within the Magic Web's spatial plane. Chapter 186 New Magic, Information Frenzy. Harvey concluded his routine meditation around midnight, then forcibly memorized the spell model and analytical structure for Dawson's Soul Drain. With familiarity, he channeled his mental energy into the magic network space. As an intermediate spellcaster, his magic pattern still had several empty spell rings. This time, he didn't need to attempt to draw a spell matrix in the real world beforehand. Instead, he used his mental energy to construct a semi-finished Soul Drain spell model within the magic pattern. After all, Harvey only needed to use this simplified model to condense the spirit seed into shape. The three-dimensional magic pattern, shaped like a polyhedron star, still quietly hovered in the magic network space. The sharp protruding edges on its surface continuously expanded and contracted, and within it, several spell rings, some solid and some empty, slowly and rhythmically moved within the magic pattern. Third ring creative spell, Mirror Curse. Fifth ring improved spell, Carol's Corruption Field. Sixth ring, unidentified, creative spell, Freud's Magnetic Storm Field. Harvey currently has 3 empty spell slots remaining, ready for spell model construction and inscription. Once filled, he can attempt to advance again, reaching the rank of High Spellcaster. I've heard in the Undead Academy that the higher the level and the more original the spells a spellcaster creates and inscribes into their spell slots, the less obstacles they face in their subsequent advancement. For example, the current legendary level leader of the Union, Mr. Scorching Lord Chemo Salas, used his genius magical talent and research to inscribe 5 creative spells and 1 improved spell into his own rune spell slots at the intermediate spellcasting level, all of which were his own creations. This doesn't mean, however, that research-oriented spellcasters have a higher chance of advancing to higher ranks than combat spellcasters. Legendary Chief Wes Gallagher, another combat mage, achieved this by studying and replicating high-level arcane spells, harnessing the pure, unique nature of arcane energy to forcibly reach higher ranks. This is another manifestation of a gifted mage's abilities. However, Harvey had never heard of a spellcaster in the Union's history who, after barely filing their 6 intermediate spell slots with low-level and general spells, successfully advanced to higher ranks. The barriers of talent and ability always exist. Simply studying and replicating the research achievements of predecessors will ultimately prevent one from advancing further in the path of magic. Engraving and constructing a simplified version of Dawson's Soul Drain will cost me a spell slot, doubling the difficulty of advancing to higher levels later. Harvey, using his mental power to construct a projection of the magic web, hovered beside the magic pattern. He closed his eyes and pondered for a long time, repeatedly weighing the cost of this magical experiment and whether the benefits would be commensurate. If successful, even if a slot was wasted, he would still gain a uniquely creative spell, one that surpassed his current level, a special type called a super-level spell. This refers to a research-based spellcaster who, through advanced magical theory, successfully achieves research results that surpass their current level and constructs a unique super-level spell. In comparison, wasting a spell slot to construct a half-finished simplified model seemed a completely acceptable price. After clarifying his goal, Harvey immediately channeled his mental power, pouring it continuously into the remaining spell slot and began constructing and analyzing the Dawson's Soul Drain spell model he had memorized. Without having to complete the inscription and analysis, the complexity of this part of the operation was greatly simplified, and a semi-finished spell model could be quickly materialized. Harvey disconnected his mental energy, interrupting the construction and analysis, and began to guide the simplified spell model, converging the spirit seed. Through his consciousness, he could clearly feel that the spirit seed, after being specially modified, had greatly enhanced its ability to absorb and integrate his own mental energy. No matter how much Harvey directed his vast mental power into it, it seemed to be easily absorbed, like a bottomless black hole that could never be filled. Soon, Harvey's mental energy was rarely exhausted. A faint, tingling pain in his brain emanated from his dry sea of consciousness, causing him to immediately stop drawing mental energy, quickly severing his connection to the magic network and returning to the real world. After taking the energy-restoring potion prepared by Igno, Harvey half reclined on the sofa in his study, checking the clock and resting for an hour, allowing his depleted energy to quickly recover under the effects of the potion. The mysterious beach within the spirit anchor was completely incapable of releasing magical energy, but its ability to manipulate and direct mental power remained unaffected. Harvey only needed to manipulate his mental power to detonate the spirit seed to test the spell's power. After the familiar dizzying sensation faded, he returned to the mysterious beach within the spirit anchor. The hatched clone now sat sluggishly on the sand, its posture unchanged from when he last left it. It seemed that before Harvey had established a spiritual connection with it, it had been a mere empty shell. The other two strange follicles still lay quietly on the sand. Harvey suspected that his current mental power and soul strength were not yet sufficient to simultaneously incubate and control multiple clones, preventing them from hatching. Therefore, for this magical experiment, he would use this fully formed clone as the parasitic carrier for the spirit seed. Even if it was destroyed by the spell, he still had two spare follicles to hatch, so there was no need to waste it. Approaching the puppet clone, Harvey extended his palm and touched it, instantly splitting his mental power and perception in two, entering a strange state of mind-soul separation. He then transferred the spiritual seed stored in his sea of consciousness into the puppet clone's body. The naked puppet suddenly opened its eyes, subconsciously reaching down to cover its private parts, muttering with its mouth slightly open, "I need to run farther before detonating the seed. I can't let the power of the magic attack reach my main body." Harvey's main body, clad in his shorts, nodded in agreement, adding, "By the way, we can also try to see how far apart our minds can connect while our minds are separated." The puppet nodded, covered its crotch, and decisively turned around, striding out its slender legs as it ran towards the distant reef on the beach. Even as he ran, he turned back and shouted to his original body, "Let's split up and keep our distance." Harvey, wearing oversized SpongeBob SquarePants swim trunks, gave a wry smile, turned around, picked up the remaining two strange follicles, and headed in the opposite direction. Perhaps it was a unique characteristic of this mysterious beach, but Harvey discovered that no matter how far away he was from his puppet, his mind and soul remained unaffected. On the contrary, as the distance between them widened, the gap in vision and perception widened, gradually causing a significant deviation. If this separation continues for a long time, I wonder if the puppet will develop an independent soul and cognition. This sudden thought frightened Harvey and he immediately shook his head to dispel the terrifying thought. But it seemed that the clone, far away, had also had the same thought, looking back in his direction. Harvey immediately decided not to delay any longer and decisively connected his mind to have the clone detonate the spiritual seed bearer deep within its body. Instantly, he heard a phantom sound of shattering objects echo in his mind, followed by a sharp pain in his head. The connection to his clone was instantly severed, and an invisible wave of mental energy erupted from the puppet, rapidly reaching his original body in almost the next second. Less than 1,000 meters away, there was no way they could escape the blast of this spiritual seed. Harvey felt his head buzzing as countless chaotic, shattered pieces of information and memories, like man-eating zombies scenting blood, transformed into layers of phantoms that pounced on him. These violent mental surges pierced his flesh and blood, forcing their way into the sea of consciousness that housed his spiritual anchor, and rushed towards the azure planet that represented his homeland. Then, like a drop of water merging into the ocean, or gravel falling into a sea of sand, they vanished silently. So the impact of the spirit seed's detonation originates from the caster's condensed memories and cognition stored within the spirit anchor. Harvey, recovering from a brief stun, couldn't help but curl his lips, extremely pleased with the creative technique created by this risky experiment. For a time traveler like me to unleash this kind of attack, it's like using a past life spiritual nuclear bomb to bombard the backward cognition of this world. Chapter 187 Bicycles and Public Transportation. Harvey sat in a chair in his study, carefully reading the work report Reiner had submitted. He had to admit that, as an alchemical being capable of entering absolute rationality at any moment, he was indeed well suited to statistical analysis. Reiner's hand-drawn statistical tables alone looked like the spreadsheets created by the office software Harvey had so deeply detested in his previous life. The data collection, organization, and analysis were clearly organized, and the results were clear. The population of the Pioneer Territory had reached 10,000. With the arrival of spring and the turn of summer, the frequency of refugee migrations had decreased, temporarily stagnating the territory's population growth, giving Harvey some respite. Aside from the 3,500 regular troops of the territory, the majority of the refugees were originally proletarians, either dependent on the fell orcs or huddled in small human settlements, eking out a living through primitive hunting and gathering. The skilled artisans and craftsmen were mostly refugees from escaped slaves and bankrupt tenant farmers in the southern border, a very small proportion of the territory. We need to open more production technology training classes, the kind that offer crash courses at night, so that these civilians with no work experience can adapt to factory work in the territory as quickly as possible. Reiner immediately asked, do they still need to be forced to attend the original night literacy school? Of course. Basic literacy and some simple work skills are essential. Integrate these two courses and encourage them to actively participate. He thought for a moment and added, for citizens who are willing to participate in both courses at the same time, the school can provide them with free night snacks, so that they are more willing to exercise their subjective initiative. Reiner silently took out a small notebook and quickly wrote down the uncommon word exercise subjective initiative that Harvey had dictated. Although he only had a vague understanding of it, this high-end vocabulary that he had never heard of before allowed him to perfectly achieve the pretentious effect that managers must have at work, allowing other middle and low-level officials under him to have unconditional admiration and trust in him. Harvey didn't notice Reiner's little move at all, and continued, those who are responsible for management and technical guidance in each factory, as well as teachers in public schools and night training, no matter whether they come to the territory alone or with families, must ensure that they are allocated an independent house. Reiner nodded and responded, sir, should these houses be distributed to them for free, it's still calculated according to the previous rental, and we can't treat them too differently. Except for the dozens of territory natives who joined us at the beginning, everyone else has to save money and buy their own house in the form of a loan mortgage. Reiner recorded it honestly, bowed and said, I will return to the city hall and hand over what you ordered. This is not an urgent job. Do you have anything else to do? Reiner scratched his head and said subconsciously, there's nothing else important. Harvey smiled, you're so absorbed in the tedious work of territory administration these days that you barely have time to work with me on research and experiments. You used to love all those shiny alchemical instruments and experimental materials. Seeing Harvey's relaxed expression, Reiner finally broke free from his perfectly rational state. He chuckled, my lord, I might be born to worry. I have a feeling that if your orders were handed over to those people down below, they'd end up in a mess. Harvey stood up, patted him on the shoulder, and soothed him, then come with me to see a new invention and relax a bit. They chatted as they reached the castle's enclosed backyard garden. As Dallin and the newly recruited alchemist, Chris, were already waiting there, engaged in a heated discussion. In the center of the garden stood a row of wooden frames, covered with a large waterproof tarp. The area currently enclosed by the Pioneer Territory's walls is already quite large. The core area, centered around the Lord's Castle, is divided into three sections, the Castle District, the Administrative District, and the Market District. The residential areas along the river have been gradually expanded to accommodate the majority of the territory's permanent population. The military camp near the northern section of the city wall is also quite large, not to mention the surrounding agricultural and industrial areas. Chris saw Harvey approaching and quickly bowed before continuing his analysis. Currently, the farthest work area from the territory is the mining area in the southwest. My God, when I went to sift ore a few days ago, it took me over an hour to walk there. No wonder the miners usually live directly in the mine dormitories and only return to the residential area once a week, as Dallin nodded in agreement. That's right. From the territory to the River Valley Outpost Fortress, even with a war beast, it takes at least half a day to reach. If you rely solely on foot, you'll probably have to spend the night in the wild, spending a whole day and night on the road. Harvey stepped forward and pulled back the tarpaulin. That's why I asked Mr. Chris to build this vehicle. Horses don't grow in the northern wastes, and raising them is expensive. We don't have the resources to teach every citizen how to ride. Reiner took a closer look and was immediately captivated by the novel alchemical device before him. What kind of device is this? It even has two wheels? Can it be pushed? As Dallin shook his head, puzzled. Before you came, I was arguing with Mr. Chris about this. These wheels, one in front and one behind, can't maintain balance like a cart. I don't see how it can replace a person's feet and achieve fast movement. Chris kept his mouth shut with a smug expression, glancing at Harvey constantly, waiting for him to explain. Harvey saw the other's eagerness to show off and smiled and nodded slightly. Chris immediately became excited. The Lord named this a bicycle. It took me a while to learn how to operate it. Let me show you. He pushed one over, straddling it, feet planted on the pedals, and in a perfect position, gently pushing the pedals. He was immediately maneuvering the bike around the garden. Harvey watched him clumsily and nervously twisting the handlebars, his comical lurching around corners, nearly falling. He couldn't help but grumble inwardly, "What a poor rider." Having solved the technical problem of rubber wheels, the territory's iron foundry was fully capable of hand-making a simple bicycle according to Harvey's drawings. While the exterior design was a bit lacking, it was perfectly functional as a means of transportation. Furthermore, the tires, made from the pectin of the rubber fruit, were both hard and flexible enough to meet the required standards. There was no need for separate inner and outer tubes for inflation. The frame was made of lightweight hollow iron pipes, and braking was done by foot. And since there were no steep slopes in the territory, there was no chance of high-speed speeds. The only complicated process was the chain, but after repeated experiments by Chris, he successfully cast it using a casting mold, and then connected them in series and installed them on the wheels to achieve pedal linkage. After Chris rode a few shaky circles, he pushed off the ground and stopped. Reiner immediately rushed over impatiently, shouting, "Let me try! Let me try!" The young alchemist quickly held the bike and said in horror, "No, no. Mr. Reiner. Your alchemical body is too heavy. This lightweight frame can't bear it. You will fall apart as soon as you get on." Harvey saw this and quickly comforted him. Bicycles are for ordinary civilians to use as a means of transportation. I plan to open a bicycle factory in the industrial zone to mass produce this kind of transportation, and then promote it to the entire territory at a low price. Well, the people in the territory only need to spend half a month or a month's salary to own such a magical alchemical mount. As for Reiner and Asdellen, I have another invention of a means of transportation that is specially tailored for you, and the soldiers in the army. You don't have to worry about the weight of your body, and it can have a speed several times faster than a bicycle. Harvey had already drawn up the design sketch, and he could start research and development immediately as soon as Chris finished the stage work at hand. Harvey didn't bother to come up with a new, trendy name for it, so he just changed the original name slightly and called it the Off-Road Magic Motorcycle. Chapter 188, Unique Ball Games. The sun was setting, and the scorching heat of the day began to subside. Though summer in the northern wilderness was brief, the sun still scorched. Vaughn finished his military training for the day, dismissed the soldiers, and leisurely made his way to the camp's public bathroom for a shower. His lightweight cotton and linen training uniform was already soaked with sweat, but he wasn't one to wash clothes too often. He left his soaked clothes on the bed frame in the barracks to dry overnight so he could wear them again the next day. He didn't mind the smell at all, it was just someone else being sickened. Boss. Why are you still dawdling? Are you coming out with us tonight?" Vaughn paused, turned, and saw Tommy popping his head out of the officers' barracks. He grinned. "Are you going to the officers' club to play cards? If you're in a hurry, I can skip showering and we can just leave." Not that urgent." Tommy chuckled and winked. "Why? You're more addicted to playing cards than we are now. Who is it that acted so arrogant before, pretending not to want to participate?" Vaughn, irritated, threw his sweaty training uniform in Tommy's face and headed for the bathroom with his muscular upper body bare. After a quick shower, he returned to the barracks and was about to change his clothes to invite Daff Wayne and the others to spend a pleasant night at the club, when he saw Commander Pierce appear outside the barracks for the first time. "Captain Pierce." Vaughn quickly stood at attention and saluted, but Pierce pulled him forward and urged, "Quick! Pick me a few guys who are agile, have good endurance, and are good runners. Including you. Make 11 of us. Meet on the playground in a quarter of an hour." Vaughn shuddered. Without asking what was going on, he immediately rushed into the barracks, pants in hand, and called over Tommy and the others who had been waiting impatiently. "We're not going to the club tonight. Captain Pierce asked me to pick 10 of you to meet on the playground. We might have a mission." He then called out names, first selecting the long-limbed smart guy Tommy, Then several Northern Army sergeants who had awakened their bloodline talents, including Duff, Wayne, and others. The group donned their combat uniforms and hurried to the playground, where they found an equal number of Defense Force officers and soldiers standing beside Captain Pierce. "Sir, this is Pierce," for once not stern, spoke in a relaxed tone. "The Lord has ordered you to learn a competitive sport, similar to a target shooting competition. The Northern Army and the Defense Army, each forming a team, will face off against each other." Vaughn was delighted to hear another competition, a direct confrontation with the Defense Army. He secretly congratulated himself on having chosen almost all bloodline warriors when selecting his team. After all, the Defense Army didn't have nearly as many gifted individuals participating in bloodline transformation as the Northern Army. Wouldn't this be a perfect opportunity to pin them down and vent his anger? After all, he'd been subjected to endless taunts and ridicule from the Defense Army playing cards at the Officers' Club, and had been completely defeated at the cards. Fighting against each other? Are we supposed to fight hand to hand? "Sir, can we use our bloodline abilities?" "That wouldn't be fair to Captain Vaughn," Tommy asked quickly, trying to clarify the rules. Pierce immediately shook his head, signaling them to quiet their chatter. The soldier in charge of logistics slowly wheeled a small cart onto the playground. Inside, everyone noticed a pile of leather armor and protective gear, complete with leather helmets, and 2 round, head-sized balls, whose purpose was unknown. "Everyone, line up." Pierce produced a small metal whistle from somewhere and blew it. Everyone instinctively gathered and lined up, quietly awaiting his next command. "Everyone, line up for your protective gear, and then get dressed properly. And put on your helmets." He reached for a ball, weighed it in his hand, and announced loudly, "Now, listen carefully to the rules as I explain them, and then I'll demonstrate. No one is allowed to use their bloodline abilities during the competition. If anyone loses control, I'll strip them of their pants and parade them naked through the barracks." Trainee Inspector Uriel and newly promoted first-class Constable Max were walking along the wooden latticework of the military barracks, chatting as they did so. Tonight, they were on night patrol of the area. Ever since the Lord opened that public card room, everyone's been rushing off to play those fun cards after work. There haven't been any drunks wandering the streets these past few nights. Max's tone was slightly complaining, as if he felt a lack of nighttime trouble had made him feel a bit useless. Uriel smiled faintly and continued, "Isn't playing cards in the card room a better option than getting caught drunk and then being humiliated by being dragged through the streets with a sign?" Even he himself had resisted the invitation of his colleagues from the National Police Agency to play a few rounds of Dragon Quest in the card room yesterday. As they were chatting and walking, they suddenly heard a sharp whistle through the barracks fence. Their attention was immediately drawn. They leaned over the grating and peeked inside, only to see a bustling scene on the military training grounds. The military training grounds often held emergency nighttime drills, so tall wooden poles were erected around them, hung with bright magic stones, clearly illuminating the entire field at night. Uriel and Max immediately spotted 2 teams of soldiers in leather armor and helmets engaged in a fierce battle over a round ball. Commander Pierce stood at the edge of the field and blew his whistle. Vaughn took a deep breath, stepped back a few steps, and then, with a sudden run, launched himself into a powerful kick, sending the ball hurtling across the field. The ball flew across the field, past a group of guardsmen also wearing leather armor but with colorful ribbons tied to their left arms, before landing in front of their own team's closest defenders. The towering Duff, who had been watching the ball's trajectory, leaped up and intercepted it mid-air, scooping it up tightly in his arms. Upon landing, he sprinted forward like a raging northern bull. But just as he reached the black line in the center of the field, 3 guardsmen, already poised for battle, swarmed over him and tackled him to the ground. But Duff, having awakened his bloodline gift, possessed a physical strength far superior to that of an average man. Despite the 3 men's attacks, he struggled mightily, knocking them off their feet. He forced himself forward a few steps before finally being yanked down by a guardsman who had also awakened his bloodline. However, before collapsing, he flung the ball from his arms, where it was caught by Tommy, who had sneaked around to the flank. Though not as muscular as Duff, Tommy was tall and long-legged, darting with the agility of a cheetah. He dodged several guardsmen who came to intercept him, flanked by Battalion Commander Vaughn, who had rushed up from behind. He shouldered any guardsmen who approached, sending them careening and knocking them off their feet. Finally, Tommy made it to the other end of the field with the ball, slamming it into the wooden basket there. Pierce's whistle blew again, and the Northern Army soldiers on the field erupted in deafening cheers. Tommy immediately waved his arms and sprinted around the field triumphantly, showing off like a hero. Uriel and Max watched from across the fence. Though they didn't fully understand, they were also drawn to the lively atmosphere and began to discuss it quietly. Is this some kind of military combat training? It looks so fun, so exciting, so thrilling. The game on the field continued. A group of soldiers, clad in thick leather armor, engaged in close combat like on the battlefield, sometimes colliding with their opponents, sometimes running for their lives clutching the ball. From time to time, someone shouted orders, ordering the soldiers to hold off the opponents or to use pre-prepared tactics to find openings to break through the defense. The intense collision of bodies, the frenzy of sweat, stirred up clouds of mud and dust on the field, and even the two police officers peeping from outside the fence became excited. Max couldn't help but say, "Sir, we can also form two teams in the police department and play this interesting confrontation game." Chapter 189: A Sudden Landslide. Standing in a specially erected awning beside the playground, as Dallin watched the frenzied action unfold. Puzzled, he turned to Harvey and said, "Sir, I don't quite understand why the sport is called rugby. Aren't olives an oilseed crop grown in the hills of the southern coast?" Harvey chuckled awkwardly and replied, I just made up the name. Aren't olives round like this? You can call them rubber balls if you want. The olives grown in the hills of the southern border in this world weren't the pointed, oval fruits Harvey had seen in his previous life. Instead, they were perfectly round, spherical fruits, primarily used to extract vegetable oil, a cheap substitute for animal fat. After all, neither football nor rugby was quite right for this game Harvey had concocted on a whim, given his haphazard manipulation of the rules and gameplay. He had considered playing the game strictly according to the rules of soccer, but these soldiers, once refugees from the desert, had never played a ball game and wouldn't be able to grasp the rules quickly. The offside rule alone would likely stump everyone, including the referee. So, Xavi simplified the rules and gameplay as much as possible, transforming them into a more accessible jumble of different arrangements. The opposing teams remained organized as 11-man teams, but with a goalkeeper restricted to the baseline. The remaining 10 players could form any offensive or defensive formation. The game was a round-based system, allowing players to use both their hands and feet. The attacking goalkeeper would kick the ball to the forwards, who would then advance as far as they could, whether running alone or passing to another player. If the defender intercepted them and seized possession, their attack was deemed lost, and the transition to offense and defense would begin. If they successfully broke through the defensive line, they would need to reach the baseline with the ball and then throw it into the goal frame to score a goal. To Asdalin, the soldiers, clad in heavy leather armor and helmets, deployed in teams of 10, flexibly forming various offensive and defensive formations. Amidst the intense physical confrontation, they obeyed their commanders' on-the-spot responses, constantly adjusting and adapting their tactics, having a blast. Asdalin watched for a moment longer, then thoughtfully said to Harvey, "Sir, I think I understand why you invented this game. These non-commissioned officers have surprisingly quickly mastered and applied a variety of highly effective offensive and defensive tactics. This was far superior to the time he and Pierce had forced these tough men to sit obediently in a night class, yawning as they were forced to learn the old-fashioned military theories from textbooks." Reiner, usually mild-mannered, said with some concern, "But they're so excited. What if a fight breaks out over a ball? Most of them have awakened their bloodline talents." Harvey chuckled and said nonchalantly, "Ordinary physical altercations are fine, as long as they stay within the rules. If someone gets hurt accidentally or loses control of their strength, the military doctors at the camp are already busy picking their feet, so they'll have something to do. However, if they're not satisfied with losing the game and a fight breaks out after the match, that would be a violation of military orders, and they'll have to go to solitary confinement and calm down." Harvey wasn't worried about any conflicts arising from this military sport, but he would still need to be mindful of the issue when it was introduced to the general public. The destructive power of football hooligans was still very strong, and this unhealthy trend needed to be nipped in the bud. After watching the game for a while, it was almost noon, and Harvey got up to return to the castle for lunch. There was a sudden commotion at the barracks gate, and several defense soldiers, led by a non-commissioned officer, hurried to the playground. "What happened?" Harvey asked with a frown. "My lord, the west wall, a section of the wall suddenly collapsed, The non-commissioned officer in charge of the western section of the wall leaned over to report to Harvey with a look of panic on his face. Harvey stood up suddenly, saying in disbelief, "What?" The wall collapsed. By the time he led Reiner and the others to the accident site of the wall tower defense, Haru, the head of the construction department in charge of building the wall, had already arrived. He was sweating profusely as he directed his workers to pull over the alchemy beasts responsible for construction and hoisting. They quickly lifted the collapsed wall stones one by one to check if there were any soldiers unfortunately trapped underneath. When this 10-meter-long section of wall collapsed, fortunately there weren't any patrolling soldiers passing by. But we're still unsure. We'll have to clear the entire site and see if there are any survivors. Haru trembled as he approached Harvey, muttering with a look of fear and confusion, "When we built the wall, we strictly followed your drawings and specifications. The proportions of concrete and stone are absolutely flawless. And thick rebar was pre-installed in each section. It shouldn't be." Harvey didn't intend to directly suspect the honest construction director. After all, no one working on a project for the Lord these days would be so bold as to cut corners and enrich themselves under his nose. And since only a short section of wall had collapsed, it couldn't be an earthquake, a landslide, or a mudslide. "Look! There's a huge hole where the collapse occurred." "What's going on?" the workers responsible for clearing the site cried out in surprise, and everyone rushed to investigate. Only half of the collapsed wall's solid foundation remained, the other half falling directly into the dark hole. Looking down, one could see countless shattered rocks filling the pit. Harvey nodded to Reiner, commanding him to release several wolf spider alchemists to crawl down along the edge of the pit. These alchemists had been imbued with a reconnaissance magical matrix by Harvey, allowing them to share vision through Reiner's alchemical connection ability, achieving reconnaissance. "Oh my god. My lord, at the bottom of the pit, there's a giant insect at the bottom. I can only see half of its body, trapped by these rocks, and the rest is even deeper." Two defense soldiers with awakened bloodline abilities immediately asked Harvey's permission and nimbly climbed down with their weapons, returning to the surface a few minutes later. "Sir, it is indeed a huge insect, larger than the thickest and longest ice python I've ever seen, but it's motionless, as if it had been crushed to death by the boulders of the collapsing wall." Harvey immediately recalled that during his first exploration of the northern slopes of Jackdaw Ridge, the remains of the ancient Black Mage Tower, located where the territory's castle now stands, seemed to have collapsed due to a sudden collapse, creating a huge pit. Could it be that this section of the wall and the remains of the Mage Tower were destroyed by this gigantic subterranean creature, accidentally digging up the surface buildings while drilling underground? He glanced around the landslide site and suddenly noticed a few dark stones mixed in with the gray stone slabs, which looked very similar to the building materials of his own territory's castle. Did the Ministry of Construction mix these black stones, left over from the castle construction, with the normal materials when they built the city wall? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190 Macrophagus Worms. Under the close supervision of a team of defense soldiers, technicians from the Ministry of Construction, maneuvering several heavy-lifting alchemy beasts, slowly pulled the enormous, mysterious creature from the pit at the landslide site. Upon seeing its true form, Harvey felt it couldn't be described as anything more than a legless reptile like a worm python. Nearly 30 meters long, its front end thick and tapering towards the back. Its body, measuring 2 or 3 meters in diameter, was incomparable to the ice python, which was only about the size of an adult's waist. Goodness! Isn't this the legendary, long-extinct giant worm? Egno, who had hurriedly arrived from the hospital, recognized the creature's origins at a glance and marveled beside the seemingly lifeless worm. Giant worm? This thing is really a worm? What does it eat to grow so large? Haru, the head of the Ministry of Construction, finally cleared himself of any suspicion of shoddy workmanship and let out a sigh of relief. Egno asked his assistant to take out the tape measure he carried with him, and measured the size of the fat insect. He explained casually, "I also accidentally saw the record in the ancient biological books of the High Elves. This supergiant insect feeds on minerals. It digs and drills deep underground all year round and almost never shows up on the ground." Harvey interrupted Egno and asked directly, "Feed on minerals? Is it this kind of black unknown stone? Egno shook his head uncertainly. It is impossible to determine what specific minerals they feed on, but it is likely that they are attracted by the food to position close to the surface, and then dug down the foundation of the city wall. He paused and continued, however, this kind of insect likes heat and fears cold. In winter, it will drill into the lava area deep in the earth and hibernate. It will only become active when the weather warms up. Harvey felt uneasy after hearing this, whether it was the huge black stone tower he had witnessed being directly drilled down by this kind of insect, or the concrete wall that was more than 5 meters high and nearly 2 meters wide being dug down by it today. This meant that if this creature's target was indeed the black stone used to build the castle, then he would be sleeping in a precarious building on the verge of collapse. We must evacuate the castle immediately. He turned to Egno and instructed, can we study this insect corpse to determine what mineral it ultimately feeds on? If it's indeed this black stone, my castle would be like a giant, delicious cake to them. Egno's eyes lit up, and he said excitedly, I can dissect it right here and see if there's any undigested mineral material in its abdomen. It'd be easy to tell. The insect corpse was too large, and using dozens of alchemical camels to laboriously transport it back to the infirmary or the castle laboratory was unrealistic. The best solution was to dissect it right there. Under Egno's guidance, the infirmary's exceptionally skilled physicians and assistants, trained by him, quickly erected a large tent. The defense forces evacuated the onlookers and the workers handling the landslide, quickly clearing and isolating the area. Harvey curiously approached the worm's head and tilted his head upwards to gaze upon this prehistoric behemoth. He discovered that even its eyes had atrophied, leaving only a large, oval mouth part closed. Through the slits, he could see a dense mass of blunt, club-like teeth. This was likely due to the worm's single-source diet of minerals, which meant it didn't need sharp teeth to prey on other creatures. The worm's head was covered in a ring of scales, similar in color to its skin. Each scale was the size of a small round shield. Harvey suspected this had evolved specifically to protect its head during underground drilling and excavation. Egno, why did this kind of worm become extinct? Is it because of the extreme shortage of minerals they rely on for survival? Egno took out a silver-sharp knife as long as his forearm, gestured on the huge body of the worm, and casually said, of course it's not because of the lack of food. The literature records that the growth cycle of macrophage worms is extremely long, and the distribution area is very wide. In addition, they often fall into suspended animation for several years due to low temperatures, resulting in low reproduction efficiency, and slowly they are on the verge of extinction. Harvey immediately understood the crux of the problem Egno was talking about. The long growth cycle means that they cannot mature quickly and enter the reproduction period. In addition, the distribution area is too vast, and the probability of 2 male and female worms of different sexes meeting is too low. In addition, there is a long-term dormant state similar to hibernation, and they often lie down for several years. This is entirely a case of precisely clicking every skill point on the road of evolution, which leads to the natural demise of the species. If nothing unexpected happens, I estimate there's only one giant worm alive within 100 miles of our territory, Egno said, plunging his silver knife into the wrinkled, rough skin of the worm's midsection. The worm, previously lying motionless, suddenly shuddered slightly. Then, its head, firmly bound by the lasso, suddenly rose, its plump body rippling. Oh my god. It's not dead. It's just been knocked unconscious by a rock, Reiner exclaimed in shock. He and Asdalin immediately lifted Harvey up and quickly evacuated the makeshift tent. Don't panic, Egno waved his hands and shouted, this thing is not aggressive. It was probably stabbed and woke up from a coma. He turned to look at Harvey and asked, sir, this insect is still alive. Do I need to kill it and dissect it, take out its stomach contents to observe the source of food? Harvey looked at the gentle but trembling behemoth, and suddenly an idea flashed through his mind. He asked, is there any way to remove the undigested minerals in its stomach without killing it? Is there any medicine that can induce vomiting in insects? Egno scratched his head, turned and whispered a few words to the assistant beside him, and the assistant hurried back to the medical center. Yes, there's a non-toxic potion that can induce vomiting, but, to make this giant vomit violently, I'd probably need the equivalent of dozens of people. Not long after, an assistant returned with a cart, bearing a full bucket of potion. Egno inserted a thick hose made from a rubber fruit directly into the worm's massive, round mouth parts and began force-feeding it. The massive worm seemed to quickly take effect, struggling and wriggling. Its maw, capable of swallowing a whole bowl, opened and closed, making strange, crackling noises. Everyone fled for their lives, scrambling away from its head. After another violent wriggling struggle, the worm, with a howl, expanded its mouth parts to their limit and spewed out a massive stomach contents coated in thick mucus. Harvey felt a nausea and turned his head away, feeling slightly uneasy. Suddenly, he heard both Asdalon and Reiner gasp, and heard Asdalon's grip on his arm tighten. What's going on? He subconsciously turned his head to look at Asdalon, and then followed the direction of the other party's finger and looked back at the huge pile of vomit that was as big as a small hill. In addition to various crystal-like mineral fragments, there was a shiny object that was extremely conspicuous. It was a huge crystal ore the size of a coffin, pale yellow like amber, and crystal clear. Through the reflection of sunlight, you can still see a vague human figure faintly visible in this huge piece of amber. Something was sealed in this amber ore, and was mistakenly swallowed by the macrophagus worm as food. Harvey opened his mouth and felt his throat was a little dry. Asdalon, I think I probably know how you were sealed in the amber crystal. Chapter 191 Living Shield Machine. Under Harvey's command, the entire team labored for a while at the side of the wall collapse before finally towing the enormous giant phagocytic worm back to the large laboratory at the Territory Medical Center using a fleet of more than a dozen alchemical camel tow trucks. Harvey's castle's underground laboratory was too large to accommodate the massive creature. Even if the laboratory's door and the walls on both sides were demolished, it would still be impossible to force its front end, which was even larger than a war beast, through. The disgusting pile of vomit, covered in thick mucus, was also scooped up by the medical center staff, placed in a wooden barrel, and taken back, including the amber ore coffin that contained the vague figure. Harvey felt that he had sorted out the ins and outs of the suspicious matter. He reached out and patted Asdalon's iron shoulder and comforted him. I guess you most likely lost consciousness due to an accident, and then were swallowed up by a macrophagic worm while devouring minerals. But for some reason, you were not digested, or not excreted from the body, and then reacted with some strange minerals in its stomach. Asdalon was silent for a moment, then continued, just like the prey swallowed by the giant python, the bones, hair and other substances that cannot be digested and excreted will turn into something called food pills and be vomited out. Reiner also realized his companion's low mood and quickly livened up the atmosphere. Haha, this worm is really interesting. It can digest the hardest minerals, but a living flesh and blood body like you will cause indigestion when it enters its stomach. Harvey suspected this was one of the reasons for the phagocytes' eventual extinction. Their limited diet had distorted their digestive systems to become extremely finicky. If they swallowed foreign matter they couldn't regurgitate, it would form a stone-like amber substance in their stomachs. Over time, this accumulated substance clogged their digestive system, potentially shortening their lifespan. Furthermore, the worm's mental and emotional states were remarkably stable. Even after being knocked unconscious, stabbed, bound and dragged around, and guzzled with drugs, they seemed to show no significant reaction. At most, they would howl a few times through their toothless maws, or try to twist their large, clumsy bodies and roll over. When these attempts to escape proved fruitless, they would become completely silent, their abdomens throbbing and visible panting, with no other movement. After the phagocytes were placed in the medical laboratory, Egno directed his assistants to sort through the disgusting stomach contents, rinse them, and arrange them on the lab bench. This is ordinary limestone, partially dissolved and digested. It shouldn't be the worm's primary food. Granite? Tisk, it's completely indigestible. It must have been swallowed accidentally and will be regurgitated or excreted after a while. This black ore used in castle construction, I suspect it's obsidian, is also in a semi-digested state. My lord, don't worry too much. It shouldn't be the worm's primary food either. Egno used tweezers to scoop up some of the stomach contents, which had melted into a muddy state. After repeatedly reducing and comparing them with reagents, he finally figured out the macrophage's mineral diet. It was mainly gypsum and hematite, with some chalcopyrite and limestone also being digested. Harvey frowned and said, if there's more than one giant worm in this area of the Pioneer Territory, then wouldn't my territory's mines be easily loaded by them? Egno smiled and said, my lord, isn't that perfect? If there really are other worms, we don't have to spend too much energy exploring the location of rich mines in the form of human drilling. This guy makes a lot of noise when he moves, and he is not aggressive. He is simply a natural mineral hound, an oversized one. In the past, When he was in the Elven Kingdom, he had heard that the ancient High Elves were good at driving and tracking such underground creatures, and following their movement tracks to explore for some rare mineral deposits buried deep underground. After hearing the hybrid elf's suggestion, Harvey had a sudden thought. He immediately turned to discuss with Asterin and Reiner, besides the planned mass production of magic guns and ammunition, does the magic arsenal currently have any additional production tasks? Reiner took out a work manual and flipped through it. The magic guns have already been fully deployed to the military. Aside from the magic bullet production line, which remains operational, the production lines for all other alchemical beasts are semi-shut down. After all, these mechanical alchemical creations, once shipped and put into use, require routine maintenance and occasional repairs. Once they reach a certain number, there's no need to increase production further. This is partly due to the high cost of materials and partly due to the limited number of living souls required for conversion. Take the most numerous wolf spider beasts, for example. Within 100 miles of their territory, hunting teams have struggled to capture large packs of adult gray wolves. To prevent the extinction of a small population of these creatures, Harvey had already ordered a temporary halt to hunting, allowing them to recuperate and rebuild their numbers. The populations of monkeys and jungle chimpanzees, the two main species of working alchemy beasts, have also dwindled significantly, necessitating hunting teams sometimes even risk crossing river valley outposts and entering the icy plains to search for them. Only docile animals like northern barbaric cattle, camels, and reindeer, needed for agricultural alchemy beast conversion, can be supplied through large-scale grazing within the territory. With this in mind, Harvey instructed Reiner, stop all alchemy beast production lines at the military factory. Aside from the magic bullets, all other alchemy materials must be stored. Reiner asked in confusion, Sir, are you freeing up manpower and materials to construct other alchemy equipment? Harvey asked Egno to bring a large sheet of white paper, spread it on the lab table, and began to sketch with a quill. Right now, I only have a preliminary concept. I need to discuss it with the new alchemist, Mr. Chris. He sketched quickly as he spoke, sketching a simple diagram of a bizarre alchemy device in just a few strokes. This length, wow. It looks like a massive python. My lord, you're not planning to transform this macrophagnum worm into an alchemical creature, are you? Reiner and Asdalen exclaimed in unison. As expected of assistants who had conducted numerous alchemical transformation experiments with Harvey, they immediately understood Harvey's intended transformation goal. Egno leaned over and whispered, a macrophagnum worm is tens of meters long. Can such a massive creature really be transformed? How much alchemical materials would it take to create a suitable soul carrier for it? Harvey excitedly picked up the sketch and explained with a smile, with the current metal ore production in the territory, the required alchemical materials and carrier should be no problem. Furthermore, some enchanted metals and precision alchemical components can be imported into the territory through the connections of the Exploration Society. With a large-scale teleportation array providing dimensional transportation, there's no need to worry about the long distances involved. After all, what he wanted to transform and manufacture was a living tunnel boring machine that was loaded with the soul of a macrophagous worm, had powerful drilling and excavation capabilities, and could accurately explore minerals. Chapter 192 Pantolin Project. At dawn, Harvey, flanked by a dozen bloodline warriors and a personal guard, rode a massive mammoth war beast out of the south gate, bound for the intersection of the northern slopes of Jackdaw Ridge and the southern mountains of the Pioneer Territory. The once dense and rugged primeval forest along the route had been extensively cut down and cleared. Thanks to the round-the-clock work of the construction department, a concrete gravel road had been constructed all the way to the base of the mountain, wide enough for three massive war beasts to travel side by side. Near the base of the cliff, a high concrete wall topped with barbed wire appeared before everyone, enclosing a steep cliff. Tall wooden watchtowers stood at each corner of the wall, where several soldiers stood guard, providing constant warning. Several teams of soldiers also patrolled the perimeter of the wall. The defenses here rivaled those in the core area of Harvey's Lord's Castle, and even more stringent than the strictly confidential magical arsenal. Harvey stepped down from the war beast and, as the soldiers and officers saluted, entered the open iron gate. The sight within the high wall immediately captivated those who followed him. A massive opening, reinforced with concrete, appeared in the enclosed cliff face. Its height and width were nearly identical, measuring over 5 meters in diameter. A massive iron gate slowly rose, pulled by the hoisting alchemy beast. Harvey had the iron foundry and steel mill jointly forged this heavy metal gate over a period of half a month. To build this secret base, Harvey had consumed nearly an entire month's worth of iron ore from the territory's mines. As the group, accompanied by Harvey, entered the cavern, the light inside them dramatically. The bloodline warriors leading the way immediately retrieved their illuminating magic stones, secured them with metal brackets, and held them aloft, lighting the way for the Lord. "Sir, after bringing that half-dead giant worm here, did you conduct the alchemical soul transformation experiment? Was it truly successful?" Reiner asked quietly, puzzled as they walked. Harvey nodded, his voice echoing faintly in the empty mountain space. "Yes, that thing is too large to be transformed in the castle's underground laboratory. Moreover, its alchemical medium is also specially made, requiring completion here," as Dallin, following Harvey's side, sighed softly. "Even after seeing your own hand-drawn sketches, I still can't imagine what kind of alchemical life form a giant life form like the giant worm, which has existed since ancient times, can be transformed into." After a brief conversation, the group gradually approached a brightly lit area ahead. It was a huge cavern that seemed to have been formed naturally within the mountain. Aside from the smoothed and hardened ground, the cave ceiling and surrounding walls remained intact. Several long stalactites hung overhead, and occasional water stains dripped from it. This cavern, roughly the size of 2 or 3 football fields, relied almost entirely on the numerous illuminating magic stones suspended throughout. With no natural light or ventilation, it felt somewhat stuffy and oppressive. However, everyone's attention wasn't focused on the structure of the underground cavern. Instead, it was fixed on the terrifyingly massive alchemical machine in the center of the clearing. Harvey, smiling broadly, walked over to the giant machine and stood there. At less than 1.8 meters tall, he only reached a third of its height, looking like a skinny antelope standing next to a giant mammoth. 7 meters high, 35 meters long, 6 meters in diameter. This is the soul carrier of the macrophagnum worm. I now name it the monoshield machine. Chris, who had been assisting Harvey throughout this crucial transformation experiment, was witnessing and personally participating in this top-level alchemical secret technique involving the transmutation of life and soul. Even though the transformation experiment had been completed over a week ago, he was still extremely excited. Staring at this massive alchemical creation, resembling a prehistoric behemoth, his eyes reddened and his body trembled slightly. A feat comparable to the transmutation of life, a genius in experimental innovation in alchemical theory. Your master's soul transmutation experiment surpasses those genius alchemists in the exploration club who indulge in delusions of artificial gods. Everyone dispersed, surveying the massive alchemical beast, their voices filled with admiration. The TBM was clad in an extremely thick metal armor. Through the cracks in the tightly welded joints, one could see the delicate alchemical components and metal structures within. Much of the enchanted metal was densely engraved with countless energy-driven inscriptions. The TBM's head was particularly peculiar, a massive, conical metal structure, its surface riddled with spiral grooves. The entire cone shone with a dark golden luster against the illuminated magic stone. Asterin was silent for a moment, then suddenly asked, "Sir, is this behemoth's head entirely forged from a single molten metal mineral, phantom copper, a mineral unique to the demon race?" He vaguely remembered that during the previous battle with the demonic orcs in the river valley, the territory's army had seized a cache of rare magical minerals, phantom copper, weighing 200 to 300 kilograms and worth at least 100,000 gold pounds. Harvey chuckled and glanced at Chris, signaling him to explain. Chris grabbed the collar of his robe and responded with a painful look on his face. This was the decision that the Lord insisted on making. He insisted on using such expensive and rare magical materials to cast the head of this shield machine, but the effect is very significant. After the giant beast was activated, because of the super magical conductivity of the phantom copper material on its head, its soul's innate ability to detect minerals was greatly enhanced. The cave inside the mountain was actually sensed and discovered by it. Reiner keenly discovered a problem in Chris's words, and asked in disbelief, "Activate? How much magic power is needed to activate such a large alchemical beast?" "I'm afraid that in the territory, only the planetary energy gathering array assembled by the Lord himself can output such a huge amount of energy to charge it. The territory currently has only 3 continental-level energy gathering arrays, which are installed in the magic military factory to be responsible for the transformation and charging of alchemical beasts. At the same time, They also need to bear the production lines of magic guns and magic bullets. The energy supply is already running at full capacity. As for the planetary energy focusing array, it was responsible for the smooth operation of the Magic Network Spellcaster Forum and the energy supply of several large Magic Network teleportation arrays. It couldn't be easily moved elsewhere. Even as Dallin and Reiner's daily energy recharges had to be completed within the castle area covered by its energy network. Harvey had anticipated Reiner and the others' questions and, with a smile, instructed Chris's alchemy apprentices to go to the other side of the cave and remove the tarpaulins covering the alchemy equipment, exposing them to the public. Remember the Demon Clan's blood summoning instrument and the experiment of injecting magic potion? Harvey pointed to dozens of neatly arranged new instruments, which were very similar in shape to the blood summoning instrument, but were obviously several times larger. I asked Chris to dismantle the original instrument and reproduce this batch of enhanced models. They are used to convert the pure solid magic energy rich in the energy-absorbing beetle's body into high-concentration liquid magic energy, which can be injected into the magic-powered engine in this shield machine to perfectly activate it, as Dallin asked doubtfully, but the blood-summoning instrument needs the flesh and blood of magical creatures to convert and prepare magic potions. Where do we get these materials? There are no traces of magical creatures around the territory, Chris laughed. Oh, don't forget. The huge body left behind after the soul of this macrophage worm was transformed is not the best flesh and blood material for magical creatures, what a self-produced and self-sold method, taking from living worms and using it for worm alchemy beasts. Everyone fell into a brief silence at the whiff of madness in the experimental procedure. Harvey clapped his hands, drawing everyone's attention back to him, and then solemnly instructed, "Next, I will launch an operation called Project Pangolin. A mineral exploration team consisting of bloodline warriors and alchemy apprentices will be assembled. Under the guidance and leadership of this giant worm alchemist, they will conduct deep drilling along the slopes of Jackdaw Ridge, searching for all valuable and rare minerals." This plan was a strong idea that Harvey had developed after stumbling upon a historical research paper and ancient documents uploaded to the Magic Encyclopedia by the Union. The article, drawing on detailed historical materials and decades of exploration data, attempted to prove a terrifying hypothesis: all the magic stone deposits in the southern kingdoms originate from the Divine Spine Mountains, which stretch across the middle of the continent. And deep beneath the Divine Spine Mountains, there is a high probability that one or more magic stone cores exist. Chapter 193: The Conflict Between Academics and Faith. Harvey practically kept time to distract himself from the tedious experiments, and just as the castle clock struck 9 p.m., he sat down at the magic brain instrument. He didn't want to miss this week's spellcaster exchange meeting. A factional conflict within the Union had been discussed repeatedly on the forums. While it was mostly private discussions among small groups, Harvey, as a forum administrator with full access to surveillance, had a basic understanding of the situation. The incident stemmed from his anonymously published research paper. After the Union's bulletin was widely distributed throughout the spellcasting community, it finally culminated in a clash of public opinion and ideologies. The Union has always had spellcasters with a clear pro-church stance or those with shallow faith. Most of them came from ancient spellcasting families in the 7 wizarding kingdoms, typifying conservative beliefs. As these spellcasters aged and their families' influence waned, their research in magic stagnated, their magical abilities gradually reached a plateau, and they inevitably fell into a state of confusion. The source of magic, the existence of the soul, the laws of the world, these questions undoubtedly troubled them deeply, but they were powerless to find answers within existing magical knowledge. Ultimately, they could only choose to believe in the existence of gods, attributing all unknowns to the power of the gods, becoming a unique group of wizards who believed in gods. This led to Harvey's anonymous paper, which, after Chief Chemo Salas independently evaluated it and publicly published, completely offended these spellcasters. Flameson, Humph, these fence-sitters aren't questioning the council's evaluation of the paper. Their real concern is that offending the church will lead to a break in the covenant, making it impossible for them to align themselves with both the Union and the church. Frost Giant, don't forget, as administrator Mr. Turing himself said, this forum is for spellcasters. If you can't stand on the same side, I suggest you get out of the forum as soon as possible. Harvey reached out and knocked on the table. The 2 forum members, who normally had completely different personalities, now sang in unison, seemingly forming a temporary alliance. They began to mock the conservative members of the forum who maintained a neutral stance, both openly and covertly. Magic Shield, A large number of spellcasting families with close ties to the Federation have publicly expressed their dissatisfaction with this paper and its author. They are jointly protesting and demanding the revocation of the research paper's merit review and the disclosure of the author's identity by the review committee. As expected, Harvey couldn't help but feel fortunate that he had chosen to publish the paper anonymously through the forum. If he had submitted it publicly to the Federation, or revealed his true identity on the forum and had another member forward it, he would have been thrust into the spotlight by now. The conservative faction within the Federation had a clear goal: to appease the Church's discontent and deflect the conflict between the two organizations. They undoubtedly needed to create an independent target to prove that this was not an official act directed by the Federation. Harvey could truly empathize with this issue. As a necromancer discriminated against within the Union and simultaneously subjected to intense suppression and hostility from the Church, the injustices endured by his faction spellcasters were simply too numerous to list. Stormwalker: if even the members of the Spellcaster Forum cannot reach a consensus and allow our members to be targeted by the Church, it would be a complete betrayal of the Forum's original purpose. I'm sure Mr. Turing would absolutely disapprove of that. This gentleman was also one of the first members of the Forum to publicly oppose the Church's actions. After all, one of his students had been innocently killed in a bloody purge by the Church's witch hunters. That tragedy directly triggered the Spellcaster Forum's first offline collaboration, a secret revenge operation led by several high-ranking spellcasters, led by the Son of Flame. The result was a resounding victory, and the witch hunters were completely annihilated. Harvey had secretly marked Stormwalker, Son of Flame, and several others involved in the revenge operation. This group was clearly the most radical faction within the Southern Wizard Kingdom and the Spellcaster Union, those most hostile to the Church. They could be trusted and wooed to a certain degree. Among the veteran members, the Union's internal official, Spell Shield, and the two mirror men from the Alchemy Quest Society, were unable to publicly express their positions due to their sensitive identities and chose to remain silent on the issue. While several alien spellcasters expressed vehement opposition, they would not actually intervene unless their own interests or those of their tribes were at stake, resulting in a somewhat ambiguous stance. However, Harvey's current focus lay with the Union's two legendary spellcasters, the Scorching Lord and the Shadow Knight, whose true identities had long been revealed to him. He wanted to see if, in the absence of Administrator Turing himself, these two nominally supreme leaders of the Federation would choose to withstand internal pressure and the Church's public opposition and step forward to protect an independent spellcaster they had never met. It was human nature to not act without profit. Harvey had already offered them an olive branch that represented his own value, a powerful anti-magic energy weapon that was ahead of its time. If they were willing to shoulder all the pressures of reality and external troubles, Harvey would naturally hand over the weapon's replica formula or mass-produced product, fully supporting the Federation in its subsequent battles against the demons and gaining a reputation that surpassed the Church among the southern kingdoms and secular nobles. If the Federation could independently resist a demon invasion without forming a war alliance with the Church, then the alliance would become irrelevant, and those fence-sitting nobles and wizarding families would have to make a choice. Scorching Overlord, at Mr. Kilthuzid, please do not worry or be concerned about the objections and protests from the Church. Mr. Shadow Knight and I personally guarantee that we will never publicly disclose the authorship of the paper, nor will we reveal the specific members of the Spellcaster Forum. Shadow Knight, however, members of the Union representing the Southern Reach Wizard families, led by a high-ranking archmage from the Black Rock City Battle Mage Corps, have publicly declared a challenge to Mr. Kilthuzid to truth debate. This is a tradition dating back to the ancient wizarding era, and we cannot refute or oppose this proposal. Harvey was stunned, trying to recall various instances of truth debates from the historical knowledge he had learned in the Undead Academy. This was indeed a tradition dating back to the ancient wizarding era. When two factions of spellcasters disagreed over certain magical doctrines and theories, to avoid a violent confrontation, they would often choose to engage in one-on-one academic debates in the presence of legendary spellcasters or the Ancient Wizard Council to resolve the issue. After all, if spellcasters, beings endowed with extraordinary powers, were to engage in a clash over factional academic disputes, the devastating impact and widespread consequences would be devastating. A small town could be reduced to ash in an instant if care was taken. Therefore, such activities must be strictly controlled and prohibited. However, Harvey's magical theories and research are truly unconventional and illegal. If you were to face off against a renowned archmage in a debate, He would likely be defeated in less than 10 minutes, completely powerless to resist. After all, he's merely a mid-level mage masquerading as a high-level spellcaster in the spellcaster forum. His magical knowledge and breadth of thought are nowhere near those of a high-level mage, frost giant. Fine. A truth debate that doesn't happen often in years. I doubt any member of our forum would be afraid of such a challenge. Humph. A battle mage attempting to engage in an academic debate with Mr. Kilthuzid is simply courting humiliation. Doesn't he understand that the author of the paper is a research-based spellcaster? Scorching Overlord, that high-ranking archmage originally wanted to propose the equally ancient tradition of resolving disputes, the spell duel. However, Mr. Shadow Knight and I rejected his request on the spot, forcing them to change it to the debate of truth. Son of Flame, what? A spell duel? He's a high-ranking battle mage challenging a research-based spellcaster to a spell duel? How shameless. A disgrace to mages. I firmly oppose it. Man in the mirror, indeed, this is completely inconsistent with the tradition of fairness and justice, and I firmly oppose it. Stormrunner, despicable. He's afraid he can't defeat Mr. Kilthuzid in an academic debate, so he's so rudely demanding a spell duel. What? He wants to physically destroy a researcher's body in order to destroy his academic ideas and research achievements? For a moment, the forum erupted in fury. Most spellcasters who sided with Harvey launched into a flurry of insults and taunts, expressing their dissatisfaction and contempt for this practice of indirectly suppressing and persecuting independent spellcasters under the guise of ancient wizarding traditions. The two legendary leaders were helpless. After all, they could only confront opposition from the church from outside, and they were powerless against this ancient tradition, which had been passed down and existed within the Union for centuries. While it's true that truth lies in the hands of the few, if further explanation is needed, the true meaning is that truth lies in the hands of the living few, as most of those who failed in the duels had already been blasted to dust by high-level spells. Kilthuzid, thank you all for your support. Since fellow spellcasters have protested and challenged me, out of my commitment to truth and knowledge, I must respond to the provocation. Son of Fire, quite true. Mr. Kilthuzid, don't be afraid. I will personally attend the truth debate in Alea and publicly express my support for you, Man in the Mirror. I will also personally attend the event and publicly support Mr. Kilthuzid. Kilthuzid. Oh, everyone, what I mean is that since the opponent is a battle mage, the challenge I intend to accept is actually a one-on-one magic duel with him. Chapter 194, The Battle for Truth, Part 1. For a moment, Fell Holden couldn't tell if his eyes were blurry or if Kilthuzid was just going crazy. He stared blankly for several minutes, watching the forum fall silent after the message was sent. He was at a loss for words. He's a research spellcaster, and he's actually actively requesting a one-on-one duel with a high-level battle mage? It was just a rant. Absolutely a rant. An independent spellcaster, already limited in resources and status, faced with such unfair and biased criticism and opposition, must have been filled with rage, leading him to wantonly engage in a physical exchange of spells with his opponents, washing away the insult and contempt with blood and magic. Thinking of this, Fell felt justified, muttering to himself, I'm angry, but this guy doesn't even consider his own circumstances. You're a frail, vulnerable academic, how dare you go head-to-head with us, the body-modified magical thugs. Of course, the majority of the spellcaster forums were research-oriented spellcasters, nicknamed academic trolls by the battle mages. He wouldn't use such a mildly teasing and discriminatory term directly in messages. Otherwise, before Kilthuzid even began his duel, Fell Holden would be honored with a barrage of truth debate challenges from the forum's research-oriented spellcasters. After struggling to organize his words, Fell quickly tapped away, earnestly admonishing this impulsive academic wimp netizen, Son of Flame, at Mr. Kilthuzid, you're too impulsive. Isn't it common knowledge that research-focused spellcasters can't stand up to high-level battle mages? They won't show you any mercy in a duel, you'll be killed on the spot. Man in the Mirror, caution. Caution. Researchers shouldn't confront those sorcerer madmen head-on. Academic disputes should be resolved through debate in the halls of truth. Stormwalker, I understand Mr. Kilthuzid's anger. This isn't a dispute of personal pride, but a battle of dignity. I wonder if there was ever a custom in past traditions for allowing close companions or friends to take one's place in a sorcery duel? If so, I can. Shadow Knight, no. In ancient wizard tradition, both the challenger and the challenged must face each other in person. No one else can take their place. This is the only way to ensure fairness and justice. This Mr. Stormwalker, a man he had never met, actually intended to accept this life-or-death spellcaster duel on Harvey's behalf. While this was primarily due to the members' natural hostility towards those close to the church, Harvey was inexplicably moved by this offer of help and protection. This also indirectly demonstrated that this high-ranking spellcaster, a longtime resident of the Evil Moon Mountains battlefield, was extremely confident in his own combat prowess, confident that he could completely suppress and defeat the challenger. Harvey scratched his head and muttered, "That challenger is also from the Evil Moon Mountains Mage chapter. Could they be experiencing irreconcilable conflict in reality? Is Stormwalker planning to use this opportunity to attack him?" However, his decision to engage in a magical duel wasn't a spur-of-the-moment impulse stemming from an affront to his dignity. Instead, he intended to use this opportunity to test the power of his own uniquely created, superior magic. Harvey had no intention of personally traveling to Lair and risking his life in this completely meaningless duel. Possessing the secret ability to freely weave through the magic web and directly strike his enemies with energy beams, he could easily defeat an ordinary high-level battle mage. Furthermore, he didn't need the likes of Shadow Knight or Stormrunner to locate his target. He could simply turn to Mr. Inner Demon once again, having his devout believers entrenched near the Evil Moon Mountain stealthily target the active spellcaster and swiftly and directly kill him without revealing their identities. The church's high-ranking judges in the Evil Moon Mines had died from demonic summonings. So, if a battle mage from the Union and the Wizard Kingdom had died in the same manner, what reason could there be for suspicion? Mr. Inner Demon wouldn't mind taking the blame. Harvey truly relied on the three strange, incubated and controlled husks he had stored within his spirit anchor on the mysterious beach. Using them to plant spiritual seeds, and then leveraging the ability of soul separation, I could remotely control the puppets to engage in magical duels. Even if I lose, it won't be a huge loss, and I'd still gain a wealth of experimentally verified data. Why not? Kilthuzid is dead, so be it. Harvey still has a ton of inactive accounts on the forum ready to use. At worst, I can just re-establish a cooperative relationship with these members. Kilthuzid, everyone, I understand your concerns and good intentions, but I have decided to accept the duel challenge. Please believe in my abilities. I have the means to defeat the openly opposing battle mage, Magic Shield. This is simply too risky. Frost Giant, Mr. Kilthuzid, I urge you to consider carefully. I don't want to lose a friendly forum member, my friend, Elemental Hand. Should I ask Mr. Turing to intervene and dissuade Mr. Kilthuzid? I think he's been blinded by anger and humiliation. Sigh. Harvey watched the members constantly sending messages to persuade him, and he couldn't help but curl his lips and chuckle. Even the administrator, Mr. Turing, couldn't dissuade Mr. Kilthuzid. After all, along with Observer Neumann, they were all Harvey's various forum aliases, layered like nesting dolls, forming a trinity of online identities. Scorching Overlord, since Mr. Kilthuzid insists on this, there's nothing we can do. Please respect his thoughts and choices. I believe, as he says, there's a way to handle this duel. Harvey raised a brow, thinking this forum's legendary spellcaster was a truly shrewd old fox. He most likely saw that he might have some powerful trump card, and he might even suspect that Administrator Turing was secretly assisting him. After all, Mr. Turing was believed to be an ancient, hidden being of non-human origin. Since he'd previously been willing to take action against the church's High Inquisitor entrenched in the Evil Moon Mines at his urging, it made sense that he was now willing to secretly aid a forum member in a magical duel. Kilthuzid, Mr. Scorching Lord, may I obtain a formal commitment from the Union to keep this magical duel secret and conduct it only under the witness of higher-ranking members of the Union? I do not wish to expose my anonymity, Shadow Knight, a perfectly reasonable request. We have previously promised not to reveal your identity. So, I can lend you a legendary magical weapon. It has no offensive or defensive capabilities. Its sole function is to mask your unique magical fluctuations and conceal your physical form, making it impenetrable to any magical or divine detection. Scorching Lord, I agree to this request. This duel will be held in the closed magic tower of Valea's Sky Realm, under the direct witness of the Union's three chiefs. All members of the various factions involved will be bound by confidentiality agreements, and no further information will be disclosed beyond the outcome of the duel. Chapter 195, The Battle for Truth, Part 2. Reiner and Asdalin, both busy outside, received a summons from Harvey and quickly rushed back to the castle's underground laboratory. Upon entering, they saw a stranger lying naked, wrapped only in a thin blanket, on a metal table used for alchemical soul transfer experiments in the center of the spacious laboratory hall. Who is this? My lord, is this one of the commoners from the territory you've recruited to participate in your magical experiments? Reiner asked, eyes wide with confusion. Harvey, his back to his two assistants, was bent over the lab table, busying himself. Without looking up, he replied, of course not. How could I let my subjects participate in dangerous living experiments? This is just a puppet body I created. As Dallin approached the stranger lying on the lab table with his eyes closed, and observed carefully for a moment. Could it be that this puppet was made using the demon blood I accidentally obtained from the evil orcs, and the secret method of reshaping flesh and blood? He couldn't help but extend his metal finger and poke the puppet's body a few times, sighing in admiration. It's lifelike, no different from a zombie. If we can solidify alchemical inscriptions and magic circles in its body and transfer the soul of a living being into it, wouldn't that be the true transformation of life? Reiner also came over and smacked his lips, commenting cautiously, why is this creature made of flesh and blood, so strange in appearance? It looks like a human, but its appearance seems completely different from the people of the Southern Territory. With black hair and light yellow skin, and a body so thin, it looks like a malnourished alien teenager. Harvey stifled a smile. The humans of this world generally resembled Westerners on Earth, with varying hair and eye colors, and fair skin that was prone to redness. Dwarves in the burrows were primarily brown, while elves had varying shades of green similar to plants. Demons and orcs generally had deep red skin. Naturally, they had never seen a native yellow-skinned person like Harvey, who came from Earth. I do intend to use this puppet body to conduct a soul transfer experiment, but it's completely different from a zombie. It's a true, empty shell of flesh and blood, without a trace of soul left. Harvey manipulated the mage's hand and picked up a transparent round bead with a strange glow flowing within it. This was the legendary auxiliary magic artifact, Gallagher's Phantasmal Eye, kindly donated by Mr. Shadow Knight. It had no offensive or defensive effects, but it completely concealed the holder's own magical fluctuations and appearance, making it undetectable by any divine or magical detection of the same level. Its only drawback is that its effects don't last long, lasting only 6 hours per activation. A single caster can only use this artifact's transfiguration effect 3 times in their lifetime. Any further use will result in irreversible side effects, preventing the bearer from regaining their original form or even transforming into a deformed flesh and blood monster. 6 hours of transfiguration would be enough for him to reach Alea via the Continental Teleportation Array and use it again before the duel began. This would allow this puppet, clearly alchemically altered and experimentally manipulated, to simulate the magical fluctuations of a real person and mask the effects of the soul-soul separation. I've called you two here to assist me in completing the transformation experiment on this puppet. Come. First, transplant this transfiguration eye into its right eye. After all, this was a flesh and blood puppet identical to his former self, and Harvey felt a bit apprehensive about using a knife or cutting flesh to complete the experiment, so he had his alchemical assistants do the work instead. Reiner walked to the alchemical accessories stand on the side, quickly assembled the mechanical tentacles on his back, took the transplant handed to him by Harvey, and said with a little uneasiness in his tone, "Sir, do you really want to go alone to a lair, thousands of miles away, to accept the dual challenge of that bullshit great wizard? I always think it is too dangerous." As Dallin immediately joined in, "Yes, it is indeed a very dangerous move, and there is no benefit. Except for your reputation and reputation in the spellcaster world, I don't see anything worth taking the risk." Harvey smiled and shook his head, not wanting to explain the specific reasons to them too deeply. After all, the changes in his spiritual anchor and the special ability to separate his soul and spirit are always connected with his secret identity as a time traveler, and he cannot reveal it casually to even the closest people around him. "I'm not going alone, either. I've brought 2 personal guards with me who've awakened their bloodline talents. Besides, Alea is located at the heart of the continent's magical civilization. Under the strict control of the Federation, there's no danger at all. As for the magic duel, I've reached a secret agreement with the Federation's chief. They won't sit idly by and watch me fall into this life or death crisis. The main purpose of this trip to Alea, besides using the magic duel to prove his abilities to the Federation's high-ranking members who favor the spellcaster for him, was Harvey's primary reason for seeing for himself whether they were truly worthy of his subsequent technological investment. After all, The isolated frontier territory in the northern wilderness couldn't remain secretive forever. It would eventually be exposed to the eyes of various forces. If the Federation could stand behind him at that time, it could help Harvey resolve many conspiracies and troubles within the human race. Harvey felt it was time to secretly reveal Kil'Thuzad's identity as the Spellcaster Forum's real-world agent to the high-ranking members of the Forum with Confederation backgrounds. Reiner and Azdalan swiftly and expertly completed Harvey's experimental procedures, implanting the Gallagher's phantasmal eye into the right eye of the flesh puppet. Harvey used physical contact to directly activate the strange effect of separating his spirit from the puppet. Using the puppet's physical perception, he guided his mental energy into the magical weave. He discovered that, just like his own body, he could activate the magical patterns within the weave and freely unleash the magical attacks engraved within them. Reiner kept on chattering after Harvey with suggestions. It's fine if you don't take Mr. Azdalan and me with you, but why don't you take Pierce with you too? Even if Pierce is not suitable, isn't there an officer of the Northern Army who has awakened the powerful bloodline talent of annihilation? Even if we take a step back, Egno is also an experienced mid-level wizard and a natural spellcaster who can instantly heal all kinds of injuries. He even lived in LA for a period of time and can serve as a guide. Harvey felt like some alchemical flies were buzzing in his head. He quickly covered his ears and explained, "Your and Azdalan's identities are absolutely taboo. No matter how you disguise yourself, you can't escape the detection of those high-level and legendary spellcasters of the Federation. If I take you two with me, when I come back, I will only be able to bring back a bunch of spare parts with a cart." Pierce's identity as a high-ranking vampire, coveted by spellcasters, is a rare and living ingredient. Even if he isn't burned to charcoal at the stake by the Church's holy light, he'll be imprisoned in a high-ranking spellcaster's laboratory and drained of his blood. As for some half-orc bloodline warriors, their massive mouths, fangs, and twisted beastly features alone are enough to send even the most seasoned wizards of Alea blasting them with a massive fireball. Half-orcs, these hybrids with human blood, are even more repulsive to them than even the demonic orcs. Chapter 196, Magic City LA. The bright, almost blinding summer sun shone, the air fresh and fragrant with the scent of flowers and grass. A luxurious four-wheeled, two-horse carriage trudged along a straight, hardened dirt road. A striking crimson flame and golden ring emblem adorned the carriage, the official emblem of the Dragonstone Merchant Guild, Orland's premier merchant guild. Harvey, accompanied by Tommy and Wayne, his chosen personal guards, secretly crossed the mountains from the frontier territory to their own warehouse in Jackdaw Town. There, a Dragonstone merchant convoy awaited them, secretly transported them to the Danius branch. From there, they used the Union's internal teleportation array in Danius, directly to Orland, the wizarding kingdom closest to Alea. This long and winding journey, facilitated by the teleportation array, took them less than 3 days. From their arrival in Orland, they no longer opted for the Union's teleportation array to reach LA. Instead, they graciously accepted a luxurious carriage, generously gifted by their old acquaintance, Mr. George Santos, and leisurely journeyed along the smooth, Union-funded highway to the Magic City, needing only overnight stays at post-town inns along the way. Tommy and Wayne had quickly learned to ride and drive under the guidance of the Chamber of Commerce's grooms back in Danius, and now they took turns driving the carriage, allowing Harvey to rest securely in the enclosed compartment. "Sir, although carriages can carry a large number of people, they're far too slow," Tommy muttered, his voice slurring. Having awakened his bloodline talent, he naturally desired to be close to his bloodline master. Harvey was half lying in the carriage covered with soft cushions, with a flesh and blood puppet he brought with him sitting beside him. Seeing the smart guy sticking his head into the carriage again to chat, he couldn't help but smile and asked Wayne, who had a steady character, "Wayne, tell me, how does this carriage compare to the bicycles made in our territory?" Wayne curled his lips and answered honestly, "If I were to drive for you, my lord, a carriage would naturally be more suitable. I myself prefer bicycles, which are more flexible and easier to control." He thought for a moment and couldn't help adding, "But in general, they are not as good as your latest development, the magic car. Although I was only arranged to test drive it once, I will never forget the feeling of speeding. It's so cool." The heavy mechanical device in the shape of a horse allows the driver to sit on it in a riding posture. By twisting the two horizontal handles on the front of the car, the steel beast can be activated, allowing it to travel at a very fast speed through the rugged forests and mountain roads in the north. Combined with the Bloodline warrior's superior vision and reflexes, this magical mount can be swiftly manipulated to evade obstacles at speeds comparable to flying. Tommy, unlucky enough to get a test drive, looked at Harvey eagerly, pleading, "Sir, when will we finally have a magical car? Commander Pierce said you customized it for us." "Is that true?" Harvey smiled wryly. "Building it is easy, but operating it consumes vast quantities of liquid magic energy. The few test drives you've arranged have nearly depleted the arsenal's reserves. Don't even think about it anytime soon. When the TBM drills into the core of the magical ore vein in the Divine Spine Mountains, you'll each have a magical car." It was still early, and the carriage moved smoothly along the way. Soon, the majestic city came into view on the horizon, and the Sky Realm Magic Tower, hovering above it like a white behemoth. While driving, Tommy exclaimed softly, "My God, these women are so beautiful. Look at the clothes they wear, completely different from ours. They look very valuable, and the colors are so bright." "Wow," Wayne explained to the bumpkin Tommy in the same low voice, "see? Those wearing dark black robes with patterned emblems on the collars and cuffs are the spellcasters mentioned by the adults. Those guys wearing pure white robes and soft hats are the damn church members. As for more ordinary travelers and pedestrians, most of them wore light-colored short clothes, and the difference in identity between them and the spellcasters could be seen at a glance." Harvey poked his head out, chuckling softly, and said, "Don't be too nervous. In a lair, no spellcaster priest can casually cast magic or attack others. However, spellcasters and priests hold the same status as mortal nobles, so don't offend them lightly. Otherwise, the Union and the Church will jointly punish you, with fines ranging from minor to imprisonment." The gates of Alea's surface city remain open, without a single guard to monitor or inspect. The unbridled flow of people flows freely in and out, a symbol of the magic city's strength and its free and inclusive urban culture. Shortly after entering the city in a carriage amidst the traffic, Harvey spotted a group of young men in dark blue apprentice robes surrounding a formal spellcaster by a small square garden, watching him use his magical powers to activate a newly planted field of flowers. These people must be students and instructors from the continent's premier magic academy, Alea Academy of Magic. When Harvey first embarked on the path of magic, he fantasized about using his natural talents to gain admission to this prestigious institution and begin his own quest for truth and knowledge. Only after he had scraped together enough tuition for his private magic initiation did he learn from his part-time magic tutor that Alea Academy of Magic was not something a child from a small rural town could easily aspire to, especially one from a modest landowner family like Harvey. Harvey wasn't even qualified to attend Alea Academy. He wasn't even qualified enough to attend the Royal Orland Academy of Magic. While he had enough grades for his initiation, the General Magic Academy of Danius didn't offer a specialized program in necromancy, which suited him perfectly. Ultimately, he was forced to choose the Principality of St. Valen, where he was born, and attend the difficult-to-enroll Necromancer Academy. To enter these higher-ranking magic academies, talent alone wasn't enough, background also mattered. At least for descendants of long-established wizarding families, admission was much easier than for someone like Harvey. Harvey was silent for a moment, then lowered the carriage curtains. He reached up and pressed a hand against the shoulder of the flesh puppet sitting beside him, quickly entering a state of mind-body connection. The puppet's tightly closed eyes fluttered open, a strange light shimmering in its right eye. After a gentle rustling of flesh and bone, the two people in the carriage, including Harvey himself, were transformed. Wayne and Tommy, who were sitting outside driving the car, had already been carefully instructed by Harvey. After Harvey knocked on the carriage and peered in, they found their lord completely transformed. They reported nonchalantly, "Sir, the Union's agreed meeting point is just ahead. We're almost there." Harvey didn't want to waste any more time. As agreed, upon arrival in Orlais, someone would be waiting at the Union's External Affairs Department to greet them for a short rest. Afterwards, they would immediately proceed to the Union headquarters in the Sky region for the closed-door magical duel. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197: The Eve of the Duel. The carriage slowly stopped in front of a quaint two-story building. Through the curtains, one could see two men in the Union Standard wizard robes waiting by the steps leading to the main entrance. The puppet narrowed his eyes, glanced sideways at Harvey, gave him a gentle nod, and was the first to push the carriage door open and exit. Harvey adjusted his felt hat and followed closely behind. "Haha, Mr. Kilthuzid, welcome to the magical city of Alair." The older man, clearly the primary receptionist, hurried forward to greet the puppet and Harvey as they disembarked, offering the ancient wizard's salute that distinguished between casters of different ranks. A young, gray-haired spellcaster standing behind the middle-aged man simply greeted Harvey and the others with the common courtesy of aristocrats, one hand on his chest. "Sir, according to the previous agreement, you and your wizard attendants and magic assistants can take a short rest in the reception hotel of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I will personally take you to the Sky region later." The middle-aged man sideways glanced at Harvey and the two bloodline warriors standing behind the puppet, and reminded them softly, "Mage attendants are not allowed to go to the Sky region. They can stay here and wait for your return. It won't take too long." Although the tone was polite, there was still a hint of arrogance and contempt in his words. This was normal. The spellcasters of Alair have always looked down on foreign spellcasters, not to mention wizards from secular kingdoms like Harvey. Even those from the aristocratic families of the 7 major wizard kingdoms were considered by them to be lacking in knowledge and old-fashioned. For example, the tradition of keeping low-ranking bloodline warriors as personal attendants was considered a relic of the past. Newer spellcasters preferred to craft powerful magical tools from rare magical materials for personal protection, showcasing both their magical prowess and their family's wealth. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, the middle-aged man hurried off to inform Harvey of his arrival, while the young man remained to guide them to a rest room. The gray-haired spellcaster led Harvey and the others into the rest room, then suddenly reached out and gently closed the door. He then pulled a communication stone from his bosom and handed it to the puppet. "Magic Shield and Mr. Mirror Man, let me give you their regards." He placed his hand on his chest, bowed slightly to the puppet, and gracefully left the room. The puppet gently tossed the communication stone in its hand, turned to Harvey, and teased, "It seems we have more than just the Union Chief as our apparent backer in our lair." The communication stone, delivered by Shield and Mr. Mirrorman, detailed Harvey's opponent's information and kindly stated that the 3 of them had already arrived in the Sky region and would observe the duel as witnesses. The high-level battle mage who challenged Harvey to duel was named Lucard. He had no surname because he came from an ancient wizard family but for some reason converted to the Church of Light. Consequently, his family's superiors usurped his ancient name, effectively forcing him to become an independent spellcaster. Such spellcasters were not uncommon within the Union. After forming an alliance with the Church, the Union did not prohibit spellcasters from practicing the Church's faith, as long as they adhered to basic laws and regularly served in Blackstone City in the Evil Moon Mountains. The battle mage named Lucre, a 49-year-old who specializes in arcane magic, had reached high rank a full decade earlier. However, he possessed no natural talent for magical research, his offensive techniques primarily consisting of modified versions of his family's inherited techniques. However, having spent years stationed in the Evil Moon Mountains, he possessed exceptional combat experience, and his mana reserves were among the highest in the mage community. He cast spells with remarkable speed, mastering the art of overwhelming foes with a barrage of spells. In battles between spellcasters, the outcome often came in the split second after a spell was unleashed. Between casters of the same rank, the battle was all about casting speed, not extraneous tricks. Of course, if powerful defensive artifacts were activated prematurely, or if a targeted countermeasure was successfully implemented, the battle would naturally descend into a contest of mana reserves, often resulting in a mutually devastating outcome. This is also the primary reason why spellcasters of the same rank rarely engage in unnecessary combat unless absolutely necessary. Overdrawing mana, leading to depleted magical energy and disrupted magic pattern functioning, can have lifelong consequences. In severe cases, it can even lead to a drop in rank or the inability to ascend again. Therefore, Harvey prepared 3 safeguards for this duel. The first, of course, was a practical rehearsal of his original technique, Floyd's magnetic storm field. This electromagnetic technique, divorced from the fundamental elemental system, had a high probability of rendering the opponent unable to foresee countermeasures or effective defenses. The true test of his original technique was naturally to strike the enemy head first. Secondly, he employed the advanced information rage, a modified version of Dawson's soul drain, which had long since condensed and now deeply embedded within the puppet's body. This technique would flood the Grand Mage's mind with the distorted and alienated fragments of his own memories, causing him to mentally collapse. If the opponent still stood firm after 2 spells, Mr. Inner Demon, as prearranged, would follow Harvey's magic patterns and, hidden within the magic network plane, unleash a volley of energy on him. Before setting off, Harvey had already given the Inner Demon access to the spellcaster form and the energy focusing array, and he expressed his eagerness to complete this interesting experiment. Harvey's price was simple: next time, invite Mr. Inner Demon to the frontier territory to witness a thrilling rugby match in person, absorbing and savoring the rich philosophical energy of his vows. He rested in his room for half an hour, checking his pocket watch. Right on cue, there was a gentle knock on the door. Mr. Kilthuzid, are you ready? If you have no other requests or questions, let's set off immediately for the Sky Realm. The puppet stood up, walked to the dressing mirror, and slowly adjusted his brand new black wizard robe. This was a new robe that the Federation had rushed to make and handed over to Harvey through the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce. The collar and cuffs were embroidered with silver emblems and patterns representing high-level spellcasters. He turned his head, winked at Harvey, and chuckled. Next, I will go to the Sky region alone. You just stay in the hotel and rest. I will be back before sunset at the earliest. No matter what the result is, we will set off from Alley tonight. Although Wayne and Tommy knew in advance that the Lord was now one person with 2 bodies, they still subconsciously turned their heads to look at Harvey's original body, and asked in a daze, My lord, you are going alone? No. It seems that you are alone. I mean, are you going halfway? The original body. Harvey was provoked to chuckle softly. What do you mean by one person or half? You just stay with me and let him go. There is no difference. It's all me. Chapter 198. The show begins. Harvey left his real body at the Union's Foreign Affairs Department's guest house, with Wayne and Tommy guarding him closely. He channeled his mental energy and spiritual perception into the puppet and walked out of his room to the hotel's first-floor lobby. The middle-aged wizard, who had returned, was waiting at the door with a smile. Without further delay, the two of them boarded a carriage and headed for the Union's Department of Magical Affairs offices, which housed a special teleportation array providing 2-way access to the Sky region above the city. On the pure white stone steps in front of the Sky region's magic tower, space suddenly distorted slightly, and the puppet Harvey and the middle-aged wizard appeared on the steps. This was Harvey's first time in the legendary LA Sky region. Although he had heard countless stories about this miraculous floating magic tower during his time at the academy, standing before it still left him speechless with awe. A magical wonder rivaling the might of gods, a continental symbol of the Federation's strength, this pure white tower is said to be a legendary artifact in its own right, transformed through secret techniques by the legendary Archmage who founded the Federation a century ago, solidifying it into its present floating form. The mysterious legend, whose name has been withheld, was the teacher of the current chief, Chemo Salas. The Scorching Lord was rumored to be his only student and one of the heirs to the Federation's magical legacy. The middle-aged mage guiding the way stood quietly beside the puppet Harvey, watching him gaze up at the Sky Realm magic tower with admiration and shock, a hint of disdain and contempt playing at the corners of his mouth. What an astonishing miracle, puppet Harvey sighed, turning around and asking, where in the tower will the duel be held? Haha, of course it's in the Hall of Truth. All truth debates and magic duels have historically taken place there. There's a defensive isolation array set up by the 3 chiefs. Even 2 legendary spellcasters exchanging spells wouldn't be easily broken. The middle-aged mage, unwilling to reveal more to Harvey, politely urged, Mr. Kilthuzid, let's go in quickly. We can't keep the chief and the officials waiting too long. After entering the main gate of the Sky Realm magic tower, the two, guided by the magic apprentices in the hall, came to a small teleportation array and performed another short-distance teleportation within the tower. After a slight dizziness, Harvey's vision dimmed. He looked around intently and found himself standing in a vast circular hall. Like a miniature Roman Colosseum, it was surrounded by a terraced platform. Harvey was facing a platform where 3 high-backed, pure black chairs were arranged in a triangular formation. 2 mages, whose faces were obscured, sat there. A full-length, silver-framed mirror strangely stood beside the empty chair. A resounding voice boomed from the platform on the left. Mr. Kilthuzid, you are facing the 2 chiefs of the Union, His Excellency Chemo Salas and His Excellency Soren Dawson. 2 of the 3 chiefs had arrived. The one at the top must have been the Scorching Lord, Harvey bowed slightly, touching his chest in greeting. Sure enough, the white-haired old man at the top smiled and nodded, his features still blurry, a hidden effect of some magic. Sitting to the right and below the Scorching Lord was a short, equally blurry-faced old man, whose face was clearly visible, though a comically red nose was all that could be discerned. Harvey wasn't sure of this Lord Dawson's forum nickname, as he didn't seem to have seen him speak at the forum. Lord Dawson spoke in a loud voice, "Today's duel will be witnessed primarily by Lord Cyrus and me. The remaining spectators are from within the Union, including the head of affairs, council members, and combat officers." As he introduced the allies, Harvey's gaze followed the others. As he introduced the allies from the Alchemy Quest Society, he spotted two familiar figures seated on the dais to the right, nodding and smiling at him. Mr. Mirror Man, they're so easy to spot. Mr. Shield and Mr. Flame Sun must be here too, but it's a shame I can't meet them right away. Chief Dawson quickly introduced the witnesses, then clapped his hands and gestured toward the dais. Immediately, a middle-aged mage, wearing a black mage robe with a battle mage emblem pinned to his chest and the markings of a 3-ring high-level spellcaster embroidered on his sleeves, quickly descended from the platform and stood in the center of the hall, confronting Harvey. "My name is Lucard, the battle mage from the Union who challenged you. I currently serve in Black Rock City in the Evil Moon Mountains. I'm surprised you didn't choose to engage in a truth debate." But I personally admire your recklessness." Lucard was not yet 50, but his hair was nearly gray. He looked unusually thin and tall, a rarity among battle mages, untouched by magical transformation or enhancement. The Director of Affairs, who had first introduced the situation, continued, "The rules of the magic duel are very simple. The winner is determined when one side surrenders, loses their combat ability, or simply dies. No one present may interfere. Only the participants may use any spell to attack the other." Haha, that's right, meaning even forbidden spells are permitted. Feel free to cast your spells. The defensive formations of the Hall of Truth are not something ordinary high-level spellcasters like you can easily break. As soon as he finished speaking, Harvey felt a powerful mental force lock onto him, scanning his magical vibrations and flesh inch by inch. A strange, pupilless, giant face suddenly appeared from the high dome, humming frivolously. "The identities of the two participants in the magic duel have been verified. No divine magical fluctuations or abnormalities are present in their bodies." This seemed to be a secret method pre-installed in the magic tower to identify and confirm the identities of spellcasters, preventing spies from the Church of Light or other hostile alien races from infiltrating and causing trouble. The legendary chief, the Scorching Lord, seated at the head of the table, waved his hand gently, and the center of the hall was instantly enveloped by an invisible barrier. Through this protective circle, Lord Sereth's voice echoed throughout the hall. "I declare the duel begun." Harvey waited for the words to fall before channeling his own magical energy into the magic patterns, activating the magical ring. A rapidly rotating silver ring, accompanied by a subtle whirring of electricity, appeared around him. Just as he was about to chant the spell to unleash it upon his foe, Rugal, on the other side, had already condensed a translucent, illusory spear and thrust it towards him with a single thrust. Arcane Spear, a universal spell for 7th level arcane magicians. The moment the magical spear reached Harvey's body, a burst of silver-white light erupted from his right wrist. A full moon appeared before Harvey, instantly making contact with the arcane spear, and both vanished into thin air. This was the Ring of the Silver Moon Guardian, a high-level protective artifact acquired from the Scorching Overlord. Its function was to automatically activate defenses and instantly sense malevolence. Almost immediately, Rugal condensed two identical arcane spears, thrusting them forward with both hands and swiftly striking Harvey. High-level battle mages often employed a barrage of high-level spells to overwhelm slower opponents. Once they secured the initial advantage, they could instantly render their foes defenseless. Two arcane spears slammed heavily into the raised crescent shield of the Silver Moon Guardian, instantly shattering it and preventing it from reconsolidating. This was the limit of the Silver Moon Guardian's resistance. When a battle mage casts 3 high-level spells in quick succession, the flow of his magic power stagnates for a brief half-second, a sign of cooldown, as Harvey saw it. He had already calculated the frequency of the opponent's instantaneous magic attacks, and taking advantage of the moment when the shield shattered, he raised his hands and hurled the rapidly rotating silver ring around his body towards the opponent. This was Harvey's original and unidentified magic, Floyd's magnetic storm field. Chapter 199 The Power of Super-Level Magic. A rapidly spinning silver ring, guided by Harvey, hurtled towards his opponent, Rugal. Despite a brief spell of magical stagnation, Rugal remained unfazed. A sneer curled across his lips, and he stomped his foot onto the ground. 3 layers of illusory shields suddenly materialized before him. The illusory shields appeared as fragile as clear crystal, but the moment they made contact with the silver rings, a powerful arcane surge erupted. Countless twisting and writhing magical inscriptions appeared on the shields, barely blocking the explosive lightning from the rings. This wasn't a defensive spell he had unleashed, but a high-level defensive artifact with the same active activation effect. The silver rings made a slight crackling sound as they struck the defensive shields, and the signs of shattering were visible to the naked eye. Rugal narrowed his eyes and began to chant a spell rapidly, hoping to seize the moment when his opponent's magic was counteracting his own magical weapon to launch another spell attack. He was 100 times more adept at seizing the gaps between enemy spells and delivering a single, decisive blow with instantaneous spells than a research-based spellcaster like Harvey. Since being expelled from his family, Rugal no longer had access to the resources needed to enhance his abilities, nor did he have the opportunity to benefit from the magic-resistant transformations to his body or the secret amplification techniques that strengthened his mental power. Therefore, with his limited mana reserves, without spell scaling or recovery potions, he could only rapidly unleash 5 or 6 high-level general-purpose spells before his mental and mana power would be depleted. Furthermore, for the sake of fairness, the Union had informed him before the duel that he was forbidden from using the Union standard offensive artifacts for the Mage chapters. These mass-produced alchemical artifacts were mostly provided by the questing society, and Rugal himself possessed no additional magical assets aside from a single high-level defensive artifact. As Rugal rapidly cast spells, dozens of crystal orbs swirled around his body, seemingly following a certain pattern, constantly colliding and emitting waves of arcane energy. A 7th-level universal offensive spell, multiple arcane orbs. This was a powerful universal spell with a cumulative attack effect. While the attack power of a single orb wasn't significant, with the formidable mental and magical reserves of a high-level spellcaster, condensing and activating dozens of orbs simultaneously could create a powerful, yet effective, spell-flooding effect. Although Harvey had previously learned of the opponent's combat habits and attack methods through information sent by the shield and the mirror, he was still somewhat shocked. He had always assumed that only elemental spellcasters favored a barrage of spells, but he hadn't expected this arcane battle mage to be a maniac willing to drain his own mana in battle, seeking a single, decisive blow. He certainly wouldn't give the opponent a chance to complete his spell. Under the effects of soul separation, the distant yet connected strand of consciousness trembled violently, like a string plucked by an invisible hand. A super-level spell, Information Rage, the spiritual seed buried deep within the sea of consciousness instantly detonated, sending countless chaotic, shattered fragments of information and memory into layers of phantom, like ghosts, surging from the puppet's raised head and features. The initially indiscriminate mental impact, after the pulsing energy struck the protective array within the Hall of Truth, suddenly rebounded and struck the battle mage, Rugal, who had just finished casting a spell. The shockwave passed directly over the arcane shield, which was struggling to hold its own against a magnetic silver ring, and poured directly into Rugal's mouth, which was constantly opening and closing to chant. In an instant, Rugal felt his mind being suddenly flooded with a torrent of twisted and bizarre information fragments. Countless imposing buildings, as vast as the aerospace, towered tall, obscuring the sky. Hundreds of strange, horseless metal carriages sped by like thunder. Mysterious flying beasts, appearing and disappearing from the clouds above, pierced through the air with deafening roars. A crowd of people, dressed in strange, exotic costumes, streamed past him like a tide. He instinctively tilted his head to see a mirrored object beside him, gleaming with a strange light. Countless unknown symbols and characters rapidly emerged. In the blink of an eye, it felt like billions of streams of information flooded into his mind. A biting chill, accompanied by the fear of the unknown, rose from Lucard's soul and gradually spread throughout his body. He tried to cast magic, but his empty consciousness couldn't muster a single ounce of mental energy. On the shimmering mirror, the strange runes suddenly paused, instantly converging into a human face composed of lines, which gave him a twisted smile. A roar erupted from deep within his soul, and Lucard's heart leaped. Then, his vision went black and he lost consciousness. The shield formed by the magical instrument dissipated instantly. The silver ring, melted by the resistance, broke free from its shackles and spun, slamming into him. Silvery white lightning burst forth, like tangible plasma, pulsing through his body before soaring into the air and crashing into the top of the protective circle. The explosion was deafening, and thick black smoke filled the area, forming a small mushroom cloud. A black-robed archmage sitting to the right of the dais abruptly stood up, shouting in shock and anger, "Dawson's soul drain? He's actually using Lord Dawson's creative spell." Dawson shook his head gravely, turning to look at Salus, who sat upright, his expression unreadable. "If I'm not mistaken, he just used 2 high-level creative spells." Salus smiled, his lips pursed, his expression non-committal. "It's not my soul drain. Judging from the effects, it's a mental attack, not a curse." Dawson's resonant voice echoed through the Hall of Truth. The protective array surrounding the duel area was removed, and a gentle breeze cleared the black smoke and gray fog that filled it, revealing 2 figures, one standing and one lying. Harvey's soul puppet barely managed to stand, but its body was swaying and seemed ready to collapse at any moment. Lucard looked rather miserable, his face pale, blood pouring from his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. His body, from the chest down, was charred by the magical bombardment. The black-robed wizard who first asked the question jumped up from the platform, floated down to the center of the hall, walked to Lucard's side, squatted down to check for a moment, and said woodenly, "There's no hope. Carry him away." The spellcasters sitting on the platform were all silent. Suddenly, a man stood up from the platform behind Harvey's right. He was tall and strong with messy red hair. He laughed and said, "So, Mr. Kilthuzid won, right? How amazing." Everyone's eyes immediately focused on him with complicated expressions. A thin man with a gentle temperament sitting next to him hurriedly tugged at his robe sleeve and whispered, "Phil, be quiet and sit down." The black-robed wizard walked up to the puppet Harvey and asked sternly, "Even if it's not Lord Dawson's soul-sucking spell, it must be 2 high-level creative spells. Which legendary master in the 7 wizard kingdoms are you a disciple of?" He paused, looked around at the platforms around him, gritted his teeth and said, "Are you trying to represent the wizard kingdom to provoke the Federation?" Phil Holden, who had just sat back in his chair, stood up again suddenly and cursed, "Gould, your subordinate lost the duel, and you are going to stand up for him on the spot, right? Don't forget who initiated the challenge." The black-robed wizard Gould's face flushed red, and he defended himself. "As the head of the Federation's combat department, I have the obligation to investigate and question external spellcasters." Phil cursed, "You petty-minded shit." Fran McCollin, who was sitting next to Phil, stood up helplessly and said with a stern face, "Both parties in the magic duel have been examined by the Federation, and identity verification has been carried out before the duel began. Even if you don't believe the Ministry of Affairs, you won't doubt Lord Tailing Enzo." At this moment, the first chief, Chemo Salus, who had been silent, finally spoke. "All right, the duel is over. No more arguing, everyone. Disband." He paused, looking at Harvey, who was still barely standing, and added softly, "Escort Mr. Kilthuzid out of the abyss." Harvey, who had managed not to faint, suddenly heard a secret voice from Mr. Scorching Overlord through his puppet. "Mr. Kilthuzid, don't forget to return the visionary eye that Mr. Shadow Knight lent you. It's one of his few cherished toys." Chapter 200 The Aftermath of the Fight. Harvey, controlling his soul puppet, quickly followed the magic apprentice out of the Hall of Truth and back through the teleportation array to the first floor of the Sky Realm, leaving behind the Union mages still discussing in the hall. Just as he reached the gate of the magic tower, he heard a sudden shout from behind, causing a sharp pain in his head. After battling a high-level battle mage and then enduring the indiscriminate effects of the super-level information rage spell, Harvey felt the soul connection between him and the puppet falter. Every step he took required his full effort, causing him to stumble uncomfortably. He suddenly felt a warm hand support his back. Turning his head slightly, the puppet saw the red-haired mage who had praised him during the duel grinning at him, with a slender, refined man standing behind him. It was Mr. Son of Flame and Mr. Shield. Harvey tried hard to control his facial expression and forced a smile. Before he could say hello to them, Mr. Son of Flame pushed his back and urged in a low voice, "Don't talk, just follow us." It was not until they left the Sky Domain and returned to the Federation's Department of Magical Affairs on the ground that the 2 forum netizens seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. They let go of Harvey, who was supported by them, and frowned. If we are not mistaken, you used some secret method to stimulate the increase of magic power? The side effects seem to be very large. Do you need some recovery potions? Harvey felt warm in his heart, and he didn't intend to explain his situation. He nodded and whispered, "Thank you for your concern. I can still hold on. The potion is of no use. What I need most is to rest alone," Spell Shield said with some self-mockery. "Mr. Man in the mirror and I have tried our best to send you intelligence about the opponent in advance, but it seems a bit redundant. Haha, a research mage who can easily cast 2 creative spells is not someone who can be easily matched by those empty-headed combat mages." Son of Fire felt that he was also affected by the map cannon. He grinned and was about to explode, but saw Harvey bowed slightly and saluted with his chest, and said to them sincerely, including Mr. Man in the mirror, "I will never forget the help you all have given me. If you need any help in the forum later, please feel free to ask." Well, this meeting was unexpected and hasty. It seems that we can't have a pleasant gathering and exchange in reality. Those lunatics in the combat department must regard you as a thorn in their eyes. I'm afraid that the spellcasters of other conservative factions within the Federation will also secretly add fuel to the flames. You must take your people immediately and leave Alea now. Don't delay. Spell Shield beckoned over 2 of his trusted apprentices, ordering them to drive Harvey back to the hotel where the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was staying. He then stood side by side with Son of Fire and bid Harvey a brief farewell. "See you at the forum, Mr. Clothuzid. Now we're heading back to the Hall of Truth to help those guys who've been making such a fuss, and try to buy you some time for any unexpected events." As soon as the puppet entered the hotel room and closed the door, it collapsed to the ground as if its soul had been drained. Harvey's real body, who had been sitting upright on the sofa, immediately opened his eyes and stood up, calling out to Wayne and Tommy, who were guarding the door and window. "Energy, carry it on our backs. We're leaving now." The gorgeous and exquisite carriage drove quickly across the spacious, hardened earth road. It was midsummer, and the afternoon sun was extremely scorching. There were very few travelers on the road, and the only sound around was the chirping of birds from the shade of the trees. Less than 5 hours had passed since Harvey entered a lair, completed his magical duel, and finally left the magical capital. The majestic city behind them was receding ever further. Suddenly, while sitting in the carriage, Harvey felt a piercing chill on his wrist, and a powerful warning of danger emanated from his heart. It was the Silver Moon Guardian, actively activating his malicious sense. Without hesitation, Harvey slammed into the carriage door and tumbled out, shouting a warning to the 2 bloodline warriors driving, "Escape the carriage. Enemies are attacking." Wayne and Tommy, linked to his bloodline, reacted with incredible speed. Almost as soon as he spoke, they threw themselves to either side, tumbling to the side of the road. A twisted figure suddenly materialized from midair, swirling with a thick, icy aura. It slammed down onto Harvey's luxurious carriage, instantly freezing it in its horses. "Oh? You were able to predict danger and dodge it. Did someone in a lair warn you in advance?" The dark, twisted figure in midair uttered a hoarse, aged voice, as unpleasant as phlegm coughing up from its throat. "A high-level elemental mage. And a master of ice spellcasting, skilled in control." Tumbling out of the carriage and falling to the ground, Harvey had no time to think about anything else. His body instantly split into an equally distorted mirror image. As soon as the shadow materialized, it immediately began chanting a profound and obscure incantation, completing the spell in less than 3 seconds. A third ring instantaneous creative spell, the Mirror Curse. The dark, cursed mirror image suddenly exploded, countless black threads, seemingly alive, breaking free from the shadow's control and hurling themselves directly at the attacker in midair. A crystalline shield, like an ice shell, instantly formed around the attacker, preventing the cursed threads from reaching his true form, no matter how they moved. "How many creative spells have you mastered, you bastard? Are you truly a descendant of Lord Sereth's family?" the floating elemental mage asked again, bewildered, seemingly unconcerned with Harvey's curse. But he had miscalculated the primary target of his attack. Rolling down the slope of the embankment, Tommy quickly removed the rifle pouch he carried on his back, rising from a half-crouch, holding his magic spear horizontally. He took a deep breath, rapidly channeling the abundant blood power within him, channeling it from his powerfully beating heart to his eyes. His once dark pupils were now stained a brilliant silver white. With a sizzling sound, the crystalline ice shield surrounding the attacker trembled violently. Before he could react, another energy beam collided with it. With a soft crack, The shield shattered into pieces in an instant. The attacker's eyes widened in disbelief, rapidly rising to distance himself from the ground, while a violent gust of wind and snow swirled around him, cloaking him in a veil of veiled wind and snow, making him virtually invisible. Tommy's bloodline gift was weakness detection, allowing him to locate the weak points of targets within his sight and deliver a critical strike with ranged weapons. However, the raging snow and wind obscured his view of the enemy hidden within. No matter how he frantically channeled his bloodline energy, his eyes remained unable to lock onto his target. Wayne, gun in hand, rushed to Harvey's side, grabbed him, and thrust him forward, shouting, "Master, flee! Tommy and I will stop him." He aimed his gun at the massive snow tornado and fired 2 random shots. He turned back, glaring, and roared, "Master! Run! Run, Chile!" Harvey knew the time was right, so he didn't bother to check on his puppet clone frozen in the carriage. He immediately turned and bolted towards LA. He had barely run a dozen meters when he heard a violent roar and a piercing sound. A familiar, gruff voice echoed from the distance, echoing through the air. "Fuck you. I knew you petty bastards wouldn't let me go." Bah, it was the high-level fire wizard, Phil Holden, codenamed Son of Flame on the forum, who arrived. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.